You're all so quiet. Oh, you're reading presents. So let's take another couple of minutes, and you guys can read over the handouts, and then we'll get started. Okay, let's begin. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item of business. I understand Chris Horton won't be here, and I don't know if, I would assume Hazel's going to be here because she hasn't let anybody know that she wasn't. So we'll go straight to public presentations. What I decided to do is, at the beginning of the meeting, is to do 2 minutes of public presentation, and then at the end, you can have your 3 minutes. And of course, if we move to discuss or vote on any of these agenda items, there will be an additional 2 minutes afforded to anyone in the public who'd like to speak on the matter. So is there anybody on the public that would like to speak? Steve? Okay. So we'll start off with Steve. Rod, you have the time? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Steve Chesson. I'm president of Californians for Electoral Reform. And there are two things I want to discuss with you that aren't on the agenda. First, you may have seen the article in last week's Weekly where Robert Rubin says the two-district system doesn't provide a safe harbor from the CVRA. He's just wrong. On the first page of the packet that I've distributed, it looks like that. You'll find my response, which is going to be printed in this week's Weekly. On the second page of the packet, you'll find I've highlighted the relevant portions of the CVRA that shows that a district system provides a safe harbor. As long as only voters in a district get to vote for that district's representatives and there are no at-large representatives, you're in the safe harbor. Second, I see that on the agenda you are to discuss transition methods and voting methods for 2 3-member districts. But before you can discuss a transition method, you have to decide on the steady state condition. I've outlined those on page 3. The best steady state condition, at least in my opinion, is where each district elects 3 members using a proportional system every 4 years. That's listed as option 1. I know that some of you want every voter to get to vote on city council members every 2 years. Those are listed in options 2, 3, and 4. They do lead to less optimal CVRA solutions because they have higher thresholds of election. I want to note that we only get to vote for a state senator every 4 years, and if the plaintiffs get a 6-district solution, then every voter will get to vote for only 1 city council member every 4 years. So there's nothing wrong with every voter in the city getting to vote for city council members only every 4 years. Finally, on page 4, I outline the transition methods for option 1 and discuss the voting methods as well. Finally, I did skim Mr. McIntosh's memo. I don't have enough time remaining to respond to it, but trust me, I do have responses for every point he makes and for every question that he asks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Come on up.
I'll be very brief, especially since Steve covered most of what I was going to say.
Your name for the folks.
Dave Kadlacek, for the record. It makes, I mean, you need to know what you're going to before you talk about the transition, so you should switch the order of items 4 and 5 on your agenda. That's all.
Okay. Can I get approval for the minutes of our June 26th meeting? Okay, so Mary was, oh, thank you. Go ahead.
Now I do. My last name is Hannah-Weir, not Weir, and so each time in the minutes where it says Weir, that's incorrect, as that is not my name. So if we could edit that, that would be great.
We can do that. Okay, so I think it was Keith and seconded by Hassan, or switched. So Hassan made the motion to approve the minutes of the June 26th meeting. Keith.
With Mary's correction.
Okay. And Keith seconded it. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions for those who weren't here? Everybody was here? Okay, great. Okay, so hearing from the public, it sounds like we have maybe switch 4 and 5. But before we get there, what I want to do is to make sure that that we're clear on the purpose of this meeting per the agenda. We're not going to go back and talk about districts again. We're not going to talk about the benefits of 2 verse 3 verse 6 verse none. That's put to bed, so please don't bring it up. Second thing is I want to make sure that for tonight's meeting that we really kind of have laser focus on this, that we don't go off on tangents, that we stick to what we need to do tonight. That's not to say that we shouldn't share with everyone our opinions and thoughts and so on and so forth, and spirited debate is always welcome, but let's try and stick to these 2 agenda items for tonight. My goal as chair is to get through, by the next meeting, is to have answers and recommendations to council on these 2 items. So I think we've done a great job of discussing everything at great length. I will say when it comes to voting methods, if we do talk about voting methods, that again, I would remind you that the council has to put this on a ballot, and the more complicated you try and make it, the higher the probability they're not going to accept it. So it has to be simple in a sense, right? The other thing is to remember my wife, remember that we only have certain types of voting methodologies that are at our disposal right now. And so although the county says, well, we could go to ranked choice maybe, and we might be able to do this, and we might be able to do that, I would really strongly urge you to think about what we can do today. Because what they said was by 2020 we hope. Well, I spoke with Keith in 2011. They said by 2015 or 16 they were going to be able to do all these different types of voting methodologies and so on and so forth, and we're in 2017 and we're not close to it. So I know that ideally there's this ranked choice and there's a number of other methodologies that perhaps a lot of us in this room would prefer. But again, I would caution you that if you put something or vote or put up a motion and vote for something that is not, we are not able to do in the imminent future, it probably will not be accepted by council. So I just want to throw that out there as we start the meeting. That doesn't mean that you can't recommend it. It doesn't mean you can't talk about it. But I will say that, you know, if we spend a bunch of time on stuff that the county is not prepared to do yet, that might not be the best use of our time. But nevertheless, I don't want to stifle any discussion and feel like you can't talk about it. But I'd like you to keep those things in mind. So the question to the group is, do we want to go to, do we want to, when we look at the agenda, do we want to go to methodology before we go to transition? Does that make sense to everybody here? Yeah, it makes sense to me, but is there anybody that's opposed to doing that? Okay, so we're going to, so we're going to move to item 5 first, and then we'll get to item number 4. So as far as item 5 goes, the floor is open for discussion and recommendations.
Okay, I just want to ask a couple questions. It looks like from the information we got from them before, there were only 4 things that they have informed the committee that, given the timeline that we have, that are realistic alternatives. But I want to make sure this is the timeline to put it on the ballot, or is this, when they talked about this on the June 22nd letter that we got from, I guess it was from you, Brian, you said there was only 4 choices that would work within the timeline. Is that the timeline we're trying to hit? That you mentioned these 4: at-large, district, cumulative, and limited?
Yeah. I can't. Is this on?
Yeah.
Based upon what the Registrar of Voters told us, if we were to have the charter amendment on the June 2018 ballot, then the 4 that I mentioned in my memo would be the only possible ones that the registrar said they could handle for the November 2018 election.
One of those 4 was the at-large method, which we have discarded because we've chosen districts. So there are 3.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, all I said was that's what they could handle. So I think you have 3 left.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that you still can't discuss at-large. If you think that at-large is still the right way to go, then
you could have, I mean, you could have at-large within 6 districts. I mean, that's, you know.
But what I heard is we are not.
Well, and you could have at-large in 2 districts if you only had 1 person running, which is what you would have in 2018.
In one of these letters, I just read that that would not satisfy the lawsuit.
Yeah, so, I mean, we understand the plaintiff will continue the lawsuit if you keep with your, if the council accepts your recommendation to only go to 2 districts, it seems, according to that letter, that the plaintiffs will continue the lawsuit, and the council will be informed of that understanding.
No, I meant 2 districts at large, especially
Well,
if you say at large.
Right, so the only other choice would be to have, put both, there's only 2 people up for election, the next election. We can't cut short anybody who's already in office. So your only choice would be, if you don't want to have at-large in each district, would be to put 2 people in one district and not have the other district vote.
I think what may be confusing with the 4 items that are listed here is that it kind of states them as kind of independent of each other, but you can have, as I think our city attorney is rightly saying, that within a district you can vote for people at large within that district. And as far as the CVRA is concerned, my understanding is that once you go to districts, they expect you to go at large within that district anyway. So I don't see that this would be an issue for us. I mean, if we're going to two 3-member districts where we only have 2 seats open in 2018, and if we were to talk about, you know, one of those seats for each of those districts, you're only voting for one person anyways, which is whoever gets the most votes wins out of these, you know, in an at-large implementation. So I don't see that it would necessarily conflict with anything that we have on the list. Really, the question is, since we decided last meeting to go by district, do we want to vote within the district at large, cumulative, or limited? That's kind of my understanding, and I don't know if that's in line with what others are thinking.
But again, the cumulative was also a possible.
It was. That's what I said. That's what I mentioned.
Yeah.
It was. If you.
They can do cumulative currently if you list candidates multiple times.
Did you say wasn't or was?
Oh, if you, yeah, but,
It looks ugly, utterly doable.
okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Not commenting on whether it's a good thing or not, but it's just, yes, it can be done. Yeah. Okay, may I, or does somebody else have?
Actually, Keith, you,
I guess I was going to say, I mean, I was a little confused by the 4 choices. I think we have, from the registrar's voter for 2018, I think we have 3 choices, right? We can elect someone from a district at large. We can do cumulative voting, and we can do limited voting. Of those 3, I mean, limited voting in a 1-person district is just voting. So for 2018, the question is, do we want to suggest cumulative voting or not? If that's all the registrar could handle.
I think that we want to try not to focus too much, I think, to the members of the public's point about transition in deciding what we think we should do or recommend. Like, don't focus quite, not in the sense that I don't mean to disagree with Tino's point about like the focus on what's possible in 2018. That I think is still important to focus on. But we don't want to choose our voting method based on the fact that we only have 2 seats up in 2018. We want to choose a voting method that we think is the right voting method, and then we can talk about transition to it thereafter. This is to say, but that I still agree that we should choose a voting method that's available to us in 2018. Because I think Tino is right that the more complicated we make it, the less likely it is that one council will accept it and put it on the ballot. And even if 2 they did, the less likely it'll pass. So I think we should focus on something that's available, but I don't think we should choose, like we could do limited voting, even though in the transition year of 2018 it doesn't make any sense because it's just the one. Point of clarification though, if we do just regular, what we normally do voting, there's actually still 2 options there. Like we could make the threshold for election be 50% or more, and so that would require a runoff system. I don't really think that's a super great idea, but yeah, it's an available option.
My thought is that given we are going to multi-member districts, kind of the benefit of going to a multi-member district is that we get proportional representation. You know, by going to a multi-member district, which is what we voted on last meeting, that enables us to go to a proportional system. There are many different types of proportional system. Obviously, we have to implement something, as was stated by both Tino and our city attorney, that can be done in 2018. But I think, as Mary rightly pointed out, how we transition into the final goal, again, we're trying to set up a system that's going to work for Santa Clara for the next 20, 30, 40 years, right? So I think we discuss the transition when we get there, but kind of the vision of what does a good election system in Santa Clara look like for the next 20, 30, 40 years, I think we need to take advantage of going to a multi-member district by selecting a voting methodology that is proportional. So something that, and out of the proportional ones that we discussed that the registrar of voters could theoretically support in 2020, again, how we get to the transition is we should discuss. Our single transferable vote, instant runoff vote, cumulative vote. I mean, limited voting as well, but I think that kind of flies in the face of one person, one vote. So, you know, I really think if we can focus our conversations around those three as a target for, you know, what does the good system look like in Santa Clara, and then as we move all along in the agenda, how do we implement that in 2018 within our the districting scheme that we voted on last meeting? I think that's probably the best way to move us forward.
But also remember that there's no guarantee in 2020 that they're going to get the okay or funding or whatever from Sacramento to do a single transferable vote.
I actually don't, that's not what maybe others in the meeting, or if we look at the meeting minutes, we can look at it. But I thought it was very clear from the registrar of voters that they were going to get things, the systems up in 2019 for the 2020 election. So I don't know if others are heard differently, but go ahead, Jody.
Actually, Marcus.
So I'm looking at the handout that Steve Chesson gave us, and if you look at the very end, basically what I get from this last line under voting methods for two-district system is that we can implement a voting system that the county supports now and leave a condition in there to change it to a different voting system as soon as the county can support it. I don't know if that's something we want to talk about. I mean, that's actually seems pretty interesting to me, because we can choose something to pretty much, if you want to say, get us by until the county can support the system that we really want. And I don't know if we could maybe discuss that.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly discuss that. I think at the end of the day, remember that we're going to have to do education. We're going to have to put it on the ballot. People are going to have to understand it. So, you know, if we do one thing in 2018 and one thing in 2020, logically it makes sense, but from a flow of how things work, the only challenge that I might have is that, you know, we're going to go to a system we have today that everybody knows, to another system in 2018, to another system in 2020, and, you know, I don't know if people would feel that that's, you know, kind of convoluted. It's like, you know, let's just, if we're going to change, make it a fell swoop, but we can certainly talk about that.
It all depends on how you do the transition, and I think that's why,
yeah,
as we decide which kind of thing we like more, how we approach it in the transition can actually make it transparent, like completely transparent, and not double training for the voters. But that's something we should discuss for sure.
Jody?
I think I wanted to echo what they're saying, in that I don't think, I feel pretty confident that the registrar of voters is on the path to getting these other methods available in 2020. And I also think that we can put in language into a charter amendment that says we move to this when it's available. If that's what we think is right, and I do think that that's the direction we should go, then I think we should put it out there that that's where we want to get to, and we get to it as soon as it's available by the registrar. And then in the meantime, then we look at 2018 as a one-time, and I'm going to suggest that we keep it simple. And so I kind of think of our by seat now as being an at-large by seat, and so I would consider going to the two districts at large, so that we don't have a switch we don't have to switch it twice. So in 2018, we now have districts, and then in 2020, or as soon as available, we go to something like the instant proportional by district. You keep changing terms on me. Instant runoff, it wasn't it? Yeah, ranked choice voting, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Steve?
For the city attorney, what Jody just said, does that satisfy your needs?
I don't know what you mean by my needs, but
The city's needs?
no, I you know, since the plaintiffs have already declared that two districts in their minds would mean they'd continue the lawsuit, what you may well end up having is, if you recommend putting that on the ballot, they'll take us to court and they could get an injunction preventing that from going on the ballot. You know, we'll see. I don't know. I mean, I have no control over what the plaintiffs would do. So, or they might not succeed. You know, we could spend a lot of money, and who knows? I can't tell you what the outcome of the lawsuit would be. They've indicated they would continue the lawsuit. It could be that you could get the thing passed. It could be that the voters see that and say, this is too complicated, I'm not voting for this, and then we won't have districts, and then we'll get another lawsuit. Or we could go to districts. They don't prevent us from keeping that on the ballot. The voters approve it. It's at large. There's 2 districts at large in each district, and 2 white folks get elected, and they get an injunction saying, you didn't solve the problem, so you have to do something else, and then your recommendation about what you do in future years would be meaningless. So, you know, I mean, I can't give you answers for what's going to satisfy some third party who is intending on suing us. But if your goal is to do something that will actually be effective, it doesn't seem like necessarily the best way to go.
So I'm a little confused about why that wouldn't be. I mean, I think what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm losing my mind on this stuff, but at the end of the day, no matter what we do, we are still subject to a lawsuit, and we cannot bow down and be afraid.
That's not correct.
It is correct.
No, if you voted to go to 6 districts, you would not.
We're not going there.
Okay.
So we're not going there.
I'm just telling you.
I mean, clearly there are cities that have districts that have sued and lost because they have drawn the districts in ways that prevents.
Where do you have evidence of that?
I have read the newspaper over the last 30 years.
Not that I know of in California.
So guys, let's not go down that rat hole. Let's stick with the fact that we can be sued even if we go to districts, we go to cumulative, and 2 white people are elected for the 2 openings we have in 2018. There's still a possibility that there could be an injunction. They could stop it and say that no, you haven't met the needs of the lawsuit. So again, you know, I said this a month or 2 ago. We have to do what's right for Santa Clara, which is, 1, satisfy the lawsuit, which I think everybody agreed upon, which we did. But we are in uncharted waters, and we can't sit here and assume, well, this might happen, that might happen, this might happen, that might happen. I mean, I might get in an accident when there's a solar eclipse because I can't see the car in front. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. But we can't sit here and debate what might happen, because we'll be here until 9:30 and get nothing done. So I would say that, yes, we can be sued again. I think we've learned time and time again that there is no perfect, I mean, there is a perfect way. We're not going that way because we've already decided 2 districts. So whatever we recommend, guys, know that we're in uncharted waters, and we may be the city that gets taken to task. So Jody, you wanted to address the attorney's question or statement?
Well, I guess he's giving his attorney statement, and we need to do what's right for Santa Clara. And I think that we've gone to multiple districts, and so that's one step in addressing the lawsuit. And we're talking about how do we get a minority having a chance to get on the council, and that's with a different voting method. So from a attorney's point of view, he's probably right that this won't make the lawsuit go away, but it's probably impossible from this committee to make the lawsuit go away. So I think we need to go forward making a recommendation to the council, and they're going to have to make the decision about how to move forward. We're just giving them a recommendation, and I think we need to come up with a recommendation that we think is the best for Santa Clara. And it may not meet the exact letter, but it's meeting the spirit of the lawsuit, and we have no control over whether the lawyers want to keep battling it or not. You know, that's out of our purview. We need to do what's best.
Rod?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Folks, I've passed around for you a survey. This is election studies on the top of it. Ballot and voter exhaustion under instant runoff voting, an examination of 4 ranked choice elections. And I don't share this with you to bias you one way or another with regards to ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting, but simply to share a data point with you. And if you can go to page 46, it's actually page, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Table 2. It talks about the concept of the wasted vote, which is under instant runoff elections, as you go from somebody's first or second or third choice being ranked up, you have some people who either won't vote all the way across and have all their votes, their choices counted, either by lack of preference, by confusion, something like that, or simply mechanically in some cases because they're only allowed to rank, 3 candidates in some cases. This shows that of the initial number of votes cast in some of our local cities, in Oakland, the actual winning amount, even under instant runoff voting, was 45%. In Pierce County, it was 45%. San Francisco, 43%. San Leandro, 45%. I share that with you solely so that we look at this as not something which is actually going to get you to 50% plus 1 of the initial votes cast. There are many reasons why instant runoff voting may be appealing. Candidate engagement, the manner in which elections occur, a whole lot of different things. However, the getting you mechanically to 50% plus 1 won't necessarily be something that occurs in the system. And it was important for you as a body to know this data is not new, but it's new enough that it's not as widely disseminated as it might be. I'll share also that I went and looked at our most recent election cycle and found that in the last 3 contested city council races where there were more than 2 candidates running, Kathy Watanabe was elected by 47, almost 48%. Teresa O'Neill was elected by 57%, and Patricia Mahan was elected by 32, 33%. So you had kind of a range there. 2 of those folks were elected by a larger margin, even in a basic system, than you saw at the end of the day with instant runoff voting. So and I share that with you primarily so that you can know it might not be the panoply where you say, well, we do instant runoff voting and you're automatically going to get to 50% plus 1. And let me say one other thing that Ms. Hannah Weir had brought up, the concept of having a primary and a general election, and be very wary of that in a city the size of Santa Clara with a part-time city council, in that would, in essence, make the election cycle a year plus long, which may be very difficult for folks who are campaigning in an amateur stead as a citizen council member to be able to sustain for that long of a period, both for themselves as well as their campaign teams, their treasurers, their finance directors, their volunteers, their families, and things like that. So that's something to also be conscious of with regards to the ability to sustain that for a long period of time. And that was what I had to share. I'll answer any questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Based on this data, do you happen to know which voting system that's in? Oh, yeah. Do you happen to know which voting system actually is the best predictor of getting candidates with 50% plus of all the systems, if you just happen to know?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't. Realistically, the best system would be having a primary and runoff election that would obligate you to get to 50% plus 1. However, in Santa Clara, again, that makes it a really long election cycle for a job which is a part-time volunteer council member. The other would be thing to consider is in primary elections, if somebody is actually elected by 50% plus 1 in that scenario, there are so few votes cast in primary elections versus general elections that you could see, in fact, a very skewed election result based on just what the general turnout happened to be in that very small group of folks. In fact, you may see less people vote overall than would be able to elect somebody by a majority in a general election. In the primary. So that that process is one where I believe that's why, or one of the reasons why the California Open Primary obligates the 2 top vote getters to run in the general, even if one got 50% plus 1 in the primary, to make sure that you didn't see that vote schism. And Brian, I'm sorry, you had something to add?
No, the other way to guarantee 50 plus 1 would be to have the election as the general election, and if no one got 50 plus 1, then have a runoff maybe 4 weeks later or something like that. I mean, I'm just answering the question. I'm not necessarily recommending that, but that is another way of doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think with just my 2 cents on, and Marcus, you can chime in because we both ran last election. A year-long election is just ridiculous for a part-time job. I mean, granted, 5 of the folks right now don't work, 2 of them do, but the whole purpose of the part-time was because we wanted to have anybody who wanted to run have the opportunity to run. And I can tell you, when you go from just managing the finances of a campaign, you know, you might put a lot of money into, you know, whoever can raise the most money again, whoever can use dark money again, whoever can use PAC money most efficiently, is that you can have a candidate who raises X amount of dollars, and to get through the primaries has to spend a lot of that money, and then they, let's say they're fortunate enough to be in the runoff, they have to find a way to go fundraise again. Now, if you have PAC money, if you have dark money, if you have maybe personal means, that's not a big issue. But if you don't, then you are at a significant disadvantage. And if we're talking about we want more diversity, then what we're doing is we're actually punishing those, in a sense, that don't have the connections. So when you look at the incumbents and so on and so forth, those connections lead to money. It's inevitable. It does. And so at the end of the day, you've got somebody who has to spend X amount of money, and then they have to continue campaigning. And then if what the city attorney said a month after, who in their right mind is, I mean, we're not going to get the best qualified people to run. They're going to say, this is ridiculous. I don't have time for this. So I would just caution on, you know, this whole runoff thing, because we can only raise 40,000, and let me tell you, without, you know, raising 40,000, if you're in a grassroots campaign, is still tough. It's just still tough. So I would just put that out there. Did you have anything, Marcus?
Well, what I learned is, even what we campaigned for, it's about 6 months now. Well, yeah. So I learned money goes quick. I mean, even people that, you know, made a lot more money or raised a lot more money than I did, I know money has to go quick. And I was working full time, going to school full time, and then campaigning for 6 months. I mean, that was tiring. I can't imagine doing that for an, you know, extra 6 months or so or more on top of that. And so, yeah, I would really steer away from doing something like that.
Mary, and then Jody.
I was just going to say that I don't actually think we should do a primary system either. Just wanted to make sure that we didn't, like, erroneously think that we didn't have that on the table, because, like, we do have that on the table. The other thing that we do need to decide is not only the voting system, but in the ideal world, when we get down to, you know, 2024 or whatever, how many of the 3 people in each district are up for election in which election? So
yeah, we're gonna do that next. Yeah,
that's a transition question.
Yeah, that's next, after we decide the voting methodology.
First, we also have to decide how many run at a time, not during the transition, later, after the transition. So there's 2 questions right now. Before the transition is how we vote and how many we're voting for.
Okay.
Because some of these methods are perhaps better suited for where we're having 3 people run at the same time, like 3 seats at the same time, and some may be better suited for 1 and 2, 1 and 2.
Okay. Jody, and then Hussam.
Well, I was going to suggest making a motion because I feel like we're getting somewhere, but if people aren't ready for that, I can wait if people still want to talk. You still want to? Okay.
Been patiently waiting since the comments from the city attorney. The thing that I would like to respond, you know, probably like 10 minutes ago, since our city attorney talked, you know, about getting sued, is the reality is, even if we go to a 6 district, you know, election method, we can still get sued. The burden is on the plaintiff to prove the merits of their lawsuit. So, you know, just as they have to prove the merits of their current lawsuit, the burden would be on them even in a 6-member district. And as in Jody's suggestion or idea, you know, maybe about 10 minutes ago, where she said even if we go to a 2-member district, right, and in 2018 we're electing 1 member from each district, the mechanics of that would be exactly the same as if we had gone to 6 districts, right, and we elect 1 member from each district, and we're only picking 2 of them in 2018. So the mechanics look exactly the same in 2018 for 6 districts as it does for our current 2 districts, the ones that we decided on last week. The third thing that I wanted to talk about was the concept of the wasted vote, which was brought up by our city clerk, Rod. And the reality is right now, like when you think about even just the last election cycle, when we were voting for president, well, the reality is whoever you voted for that didn't win, your vote was quote unquote wasted anyways, right? It was wasted because your candidate didn't win. So the reality is in all of these systems, some people's votes are going to be wasted because their candidate didn't win. As a matter of fact, when we talk about wasted votes, instant runoff and single transferable votes give you less of a chance that your vote is going to be wasted, because if your candidate didn't win, your second best candidate might win. And if they don't win, then your third best candidate might win. So there is no wasted vote when you come to a ranked choice system where you get to rank all the candidates. I know the election, the registrar may limit us to say rank your 1, 2, and 3 only, and there are 10 people running, so you don't get to rank 7 of them. So that may be a scenario where some of them, where you don't get to pick a winner. But if you're ranking all of the candidates, one of them is going to win, or 2 of them, or 3 of them is going to win. It's just in which order of your priority do they win. So I think it's really important that as we go forward and we look at the concept of wasted votes, that we actually acknowledge that single transferable vote and instant runoff vote, or the ranked choice vote, actually reduce the amount of wasted votes as much as possible. And as a matter of fact, the difference when I know there's a lot of confusion on the terms, and I actually asked Ronnie and Tino if we could have a whiteboard up here, if people see it valuable to know the difference between instant runoff, which is also known as ranked choice, and the single transferable vote, which is almost exactly the same as ranked choice, with one slight difference, and that is it reduces waste even more. It reduces wasted votes even more. So I'm happy to go up there and at least explain what I understand about it, and maybe some of the experts in the room can correct me if I'm wrong. But in a nutshell, the single transferable vote, the only slight difference between it and ranked choice is that it doesn't waste the vote if somebody's super popular and everybody votes for them, because then their vote never goes to their second choice and that person won. So I really think that we should highly consider a single transferable vote or a ranked choice voting. The mechanics of it from a voter's perspective is exactly the same. You write 1, 2, and 3. It's exactly the same. The calculation of how the votes are distributed is where the difference lies. It's still important to educate the voter on what the difference is, but the mechanics are exactly the same, and the registrar, as they mentioned to us in the previous meeting, can handle either of them.
Teresa?
So I can see all the merits of what you're saying, but I think if we look at the information we were just given, when you have these cumbersome voting methodologies in place, you actually have less people voting. You're disenfranchising people because it becomes clunky, hard to understand, and people are less likely to be engaged in the process. And if we're changing things in the city, the idea would be that you'd have more of the electorate engaged and voting. So I think if we do something that's really clunky, we're probably going to see less people actually voting.
I don't see how it's clunky when a lot of cities around the country are doing it. When you just rank, basically the bubble chart or whatever, the line chart that says, who would you like as your first pick? Oh, I really like that person. Who would you like as your second pick? I really like that person. Who would you like as your third pick? I really like that person. At the end of the day, because we've gone to districts, the voter fatigue kind of stays the same, because before districts, we had to vote for 6 people, right? Now we're only voting for 3 people per district. So you're still filling out 3 lines. Who are your top 3? It's the same as vote for seat 1, 2, and 3. You're voting for 1 line each. So the voter fatigue doesn't really apply since we've gone to districts, which reduces the number of lines that you'd actually have to fill.
But it did apply, because we're looking at the evidence that
I don't think this evidence applies to what we're talking about here. So I obviously none of us really had a chance to read this in the 10 seconds since we've had it, but I don't think that it applies here. And it's already, I mean, those who know about the election systems will tell you that single transferable vote and instant runoff vote, or the ranked choice, actually reduce the number of wasted votes. I see some nodding in the back, a lot of nodding in the back. But
so I don't know what the empirical evidence is, but I think you need to have the empirical evidence to see what happens when you go to these voting methodologies, what the percentage of the electorate is actually voting, before you do something that's what I would think would be perceived as clunky. So that would be what I would want people to think about. Yeah, so that's what I would like people to think about as we discuss this.
I want to remind folks to speak loud and clear. And don't worry if your voice is too loud, just so that way everybody can hear.
Thank you. I mean, as I understand, we have been using the term instant runoff voting and ranked choice voting interchangeably. I don't think they're interchangeable. I think instant runoff is when you're electing one person and you vote for your top 3 candidates. Ranked choice is what, if you are electing 3 people and I rank the candidates and the sum of all of our rankings decide who the top 3 are, that's ranked choice voting. And this paper, from having, from the point of view of a voter, plausibly do the same thing. I'm ranking things. We all rank how much we like hot dogs versus hamburgers versus chips. I mean, ranking things is something we do a lot. And I haven't read, but I mean, I skimmed this paper, and I think all of the races it's talking about are instant runoff, one candidate elections. I could see how one candidate election, when you have to rank your people, the top 5, maybe you would think your vote was wasted. I lived in Santa Clara for 25 years now. I will tell you my batting percentage of people I voted for getting onto the city council is well under 42%. So
thank you, Steve, for your non-support in that last election.
I might tell you, last election was well under, was I think 30%. So if 42% of the people that I vote for getting elected is what makes voters happy or not, I would be much happier to get to 42% than where I currently am. Also, to a point earlier, when the city attorney mentioned he didn't know of anyone in California that had been sued, San Mateo County went to districts 10 years ago. After they put it on the ballot, the city approved 6 districts. 18 months later, they got sued because they drew the districts wrong. And then they had to pay a bunch of money and redraw the districts. No matter what you do, you can get sued if you don't do exactly what people that can sue you want to do. And anyone can sue you. And so, I mean, as I understand, if the real purpose of the California Voting Rights Act is to ensure that we have representation for protected classes, and if we design a system that is more likely to do that than the system we currently have, I think we've done a good thing. And so to that effect, I mean, I think we have, if we have 2 districts, we have 3 people in each district, which we've never really talked about the size of the council. I think we've just always assumed it was going to stay at 7 and the mayor was going to be one of them. And so we had 6 council member seats. If we have 2 districts, 3 people in each district, we either elect 3 of them every 4 years, or we elect 2 of them and 2 years later elect a second one. And a third person. And of those 2 options, I prefer 3 at once. Because I think it would just lead to more gamemanship of, do I want to run in a district when there are 2 seats up versus 1 seat up? Do I want to see signs all the time? You know, every 2 years, do I want to see signs for people? Am I confused about why? Well, I voted for 2 people last time and now there's only 1 person. I mean, if we're going for simpler, you look at your ballot, there are 3 people. You can vote for the 3 people. The next time there's an election, you can vote for your 3 people the next time. And from that, then there's single transferable vote, there's ranked choice voting, there's limited voting. I don't think there's another system that lets us vote for cumulative voting. Of those, I like limited least. Because I think if you told people there are 3 people on the city council from your district, but you only get to vote for 1 person, you're just going to look at that and think, 2 of those people don't represent me, or 2 of those seats will never represent me. So I put limited at the bottom. I don't like cumulative just because it looks weird, and I think ranked choice and single transferable vote are better than cumulative. And looking ugly and being worse, I don't like. So for me, the 2 opportunities we have are single transferable vote or ranked choice voting. The Registrar of Voters said you are likely to get ranked choice voting in 2020. They could do ranked choice today if the Secretary of State said they can flip a switch in the software they have. That's the only reason they can't do it for our county today, is because our county doesn't have permission to do ranked choice voting. But the exact same software our county is used in San Francisco and Oakland or Berkeley or wherever, and they do ranked choice voting. They did not, I mean, they said they thought they would get single transferable vote by 2020, but they have to go to the new system. So if we wanted to pick something that we were pretty sure they could do by 2020, I think they're more likely to be able to do ranked choice voting than single transferable vote. But from my perspective, I would be happy recommending either one. I was happy to see that other people have passed this conditionally, and I would be happy to make a recommendation to council that we vote on this and say we go to single transferable vote when the county registrar's system is capable of doing it, with the expectation that that would be in 2020. And then eventually I'm happy to talk about 2018. But I think that's a one-off that we just have to come up with something good enough until then.
So I'm a little confused. You said that you prefer ranked choice. I thought, maybe I heard you wrong, that you prefer ranked choice over single transferable, but single transferable for 2020. So I'm not quite...
No, for 2020, I have I think ranked choice is plausibly a little more likely to happen in 2020. Because the Registrar of Voters office, even if they didn't buy a new system and get it installed by 2020, is likely to be able to ask the Secretary of State, hey, can we flip the switch and turn on ranked choice for Santa Clara, just like we flipped it for Oakland and San Francisco, and get a yes answer back. If they don't get a new voting system if they don't get the new, X+1 voting system by 2020, they can't do single transferable vote.
Jody?
I like what you're saying, and I think one benefit of going ranked choice over single transferable vote is the fact that other jurisdictions in the Bay Area have done it, and I think that will help get people over the fear of, oh my God, this is just crazy, and we're doing something totally different from everyone else. If we can say, we're just doing the way that other cities in our area, like San Francisco and Oakland, are moving to, so now we're moving to that. I think that really helps with the voter education, that it's not some new thing that we're coming up with ourselves. It's something that others have done in the area and have been successful with. And I think that would be a big positive for voters to not be quite so scared about it. I mean, we know that they're going to make mistakes. They already do. They don't get it, and they don't read the directions carefully. But I think there would be plenty of people who might get really nervous or not understand it if we do something with a totally different name, even though it's very similar, versus going to something like ranked choice, which is a known quantity in the Bay Area.
So can I get a point of clarification? Go ahead. Because we do so well at it.
Yeah, my name is Jennifer Pay. I'm the director of Fair Vote California. So the terminology I know gets really confusing. Ranked choice voting is overall, you can be used under a single seat or a multi-seat. you can use ranked choice voting. In a multi-seat setting, it's still called ranked choice voting with multi-seat, otherwise known as single transferable vote. So that's why it's interchangeable. It's essentially it's the same thing. RCV in multi-seat is STV. RCV in a single seat is ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting, and sometimes those words are also used interchangeably. Just that's the point of clarification.
So single transferable vote is ranked choice voting with multi-member
seats. Yes, that is correct.
But the description from the ROV is different, because in the description that they gave us, it says for single transferable vote that excess votes are reallocated proportional to their voters' second choices.
That is correct.
And that's not
under ranked choice voting under single seat, because you're electing one person. In multiple seat settings, you're ensuring that multiple candidates, their votes are being transferred in both eliminating the person who got the least amount of votes getting transferred, as well as the person who got more than the surplus, more than the threshold needed. Those votes also get transferred.
Okay, so their ranked choice voting description was for a single member seat.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you were not. Kidding. Mary?
So can I ask one more question
Go ahead.
one of our many experts over there? Is that, so right now in Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, where they use this, are any of those multi-member, or are those all single member, so it doesn't, so if we went to a multi-member, we would have to explain the math differently anyway?
Great question. So yes, the 4 Bay Area cities currently are using ranked choice voting because they're single seats, whether it be mayor or for city council, school board. The difference in, say, Cambridge, Massachusetts, they use STV, otherwise known as RCV, multi-member seats. Yeah.
Hold on, Steve. Let's just.
But first, I would like to say, just going back to my previous point, we're having a hard time understanding the logistics, the explanations of this. Trying to explain it to the whole city of Santa Clara, I think is going to be very challenging. We've spent a lot of time doing the reading and the research, and this is where we're at. So I'd just like to point that out.
Beverly and then Saskia. Oh, Saskia? Saskia, did you want to speak? No problem.
Thank you, Keith. Just back to this sheet that Rod gave, I think this is very important because it says in the conclusion, it says the results on page 49. Right at the bottom of the conclusion, it says the results highlight a key political reality. No electoral system is perfect, and every method comes with its own set of democratic trade-offs. So, I mean, it doesn't matter what we do. It's going to be, there are going to be trade-offs. We all know that the current system is not perfect in any way, otherwise we wouldn't be having a lawsuit, right? I mean, that's the most obvious, so we can't stay where we are. We need to move on and we need to pick something, and it's clearly obvious that other cities have done something. Here's a little thought. Maybe people talk to each other and say, oh, we do this system, and you could try this system too. So I think we're underestimating how intelligent our local community is, and I think those that vote usually are the most intelligent at some point. Not to be, it's just a thought process, because you value the process of voting. Otherwise you wouldn't go out to register yourself here. Very different from a system where I come from, where everybody has to vote no matter what, where I find that people are far more in tune with what's going on, whereas here they're thinking about the process. So I think we have some very deep thinking people here, and I think they can cope with the change.
Jody?
And to follow on that, so with the school board elections, we have multi-member seats, multi-member seats, districts, yes, districts. Sorry, now you're getting me confused. So we have multi-member seats, districts, and then we also have some of our districts that only have one seat being voted on. And you can see in the same election where you should get double the number of votes in the 2-seat district as you do in the 1-seat district, right? Because if everyone votes the way they're supposed to, they would vote for 1 for the 1 and 2 for the 2-seat district. We never see that. it's never double. It's less than double, which means that people are not following directions, which means they're voting for one in each because it didn't connect. But if they do that with this new method, this single transferable vote, and they only vote for one, it's not the end of the world. They still put in their vote. And it just means if that person turns out to be the bottom that they voted for, then they don't get another vote. But they have voted. So they're still going to the polls, and over time, we keep doing education. It's not going to be just one election cycle. We keep doing education so that they keep understanding it, and word gets around, and they're like, oh, you mean I could have voted for more? Yes, you could have. Next time, you'll do it better. So the first time is going to be a transition, but if they do it wrong, it's not the end of the world. They're still voting, and they're still putting out some votes there that will matter. So it's not like if we do this and they mess up, like their ballot is invalidated. No, it'll still get used. It just they haven't given as many choices as they could have.
Can I make a...
Go ahead, Osam.
I want to say something else, but I just want to make one correction on what you said, Jody. When people can vote for two, but they only vote for one, it's one of two cases. Either they didn't know they could vote for the second, so they weren't a very educated voter, or they were a really smart voter, and they were voting very strategically. So it's one or the other. And because they didn't want to give a leg up to somebody who actually might not.
I know that, but I don't want to go there. That's
I know. Okay.
But that's a very valid point. If I don't want any of the others to challenge my guy or my woman,
you may choose not to vote.
You may just choose one and say, I'm not going to give anybody any power to, because if I vote for the second and third, and let's say that, wow, now, I mean, every system, guys, can be manipulated. I mean, and that's what I think Rod's kind of a summary here or whatever study shows. I mean, every system can be manipulated, whether it's ranked choice, whether it's cumulative, whether it's limited. I mean, so, and if we went to 6 districts, cumulative, whatever the case is, we could still be sued. So again, going back to what Teresa said, I think there's some merit in that if you make it too confusing, guys, it's not going to get passed. If you make it too confusing, the council might simply say, this is way too confusing. They may not. But let's not pretend that if we do this and we do this, it's going to solve the problem. It might be a better way of doing it, but it's not a certainty, as this study shows, that you're going to get what you're looking for. So just keep that in mind as you have to. And the other thing about educating voters, right? I heard Jody say, oh, well, next time. Well, be the candidate that's running and go, well, great, because half the city didn't understand how the hell to vote. So maybe, it's not as simple as it sounds. And again, I just want people to, Teresa, to me, made a heck of a point. We've been here for an hour and 4 minutes, and we're still in circles trying to understand how it would all work. So anyways, I just want to put that out there. Hold on.
Okay. No,
Mary?
but I needed to finish my comment because you kind of...
Oh, did I cut you off?
Yeah, you kind of...
Oh, you weren't done yet?
No,
okay.
Never. I'm not done until you cut me off.
There was a reason.
So the comment that I wanted to make is that there were a lot of still confusion as to what the systems were. So if several people in the committee would like me to walk up to the whiteboard, which I asked Rania to bring, to just briefly explain, very briefly, and I mean it, very briefly explain how we could explain to voters how ranked choice works, I would be more than happy to do so with our experts correcting me along the way if I make any mistakes. If people are confused, I mean,
does anybody not know how ranked choice works?
So that's the thing, Jody. It sounds like some people are confused. I don't want to assume. Would anybody object to me doing it? Let me ask that way.
For the sake of time, I would.
Okay.
I mean, I think we've talked about ranked choice and cumulative over and over and over and over again. So, but if anybody wants a really quick,
I'll make it in under 2 minutes.
okay, so 2 minutes. I would bring the whiteboard up here so people can see what you're writing. That's fine. Just put it up here so they can focus in on it.
Okay, let's assume that we're just going to vote for 2 people, or you know what? Let's just stick to what we have so nobody's confused. There are 3 seats open, and maybe Adam.
Just A, B, and C.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. So, okay, so there are 6 people running for 3 seats. Okay, so this is 0% of the vote, and you need.
What method are you talking about?
We're now going to do single transferable vote, the ranked choice one.
Okay.
Okay, so with 3 seats, you need 33% to win. 25% to win. Okay, so you need 25% to win. Yes. And the reason is if 3 people get 25% plus 1 each, then you now have 75% plus 3 of the entire city, so the next best person can only get 24% or 25% minus 3. So they won't have enough to win. So let's say, so this is the threshold to win. If you get more than this, you're guaranteed a seat because you got more than 25% of the vote. Yes, nod your heads. Okay, good. So let's say Adam is really or A is really popular, and they get maybe 35%. Okay, so the way somebody votes is they say, you know, here are the candidates. This is how a ballot would look like: A, B, C, D, E, F, and you say, I really like Frank, so I'm going to pick them as number 1. I like Diane, so I'm going to pick her as number 2. I like Bob, so I'm going to pick him as number 3, and so on and so forth. Okay? So the way you do it is you calculate how many people voted for Adam as their number 1 pick. You just rank by number 1 pick because that's what people care about the most. So like let's say he gets that much, and this person gets that much, this person gets that much, poor guy. And that person gets this much, and then maybe this person gets this much, okay? So what happens in this system is that Adam already won, okay? So if I was voting for Adam, and maybe Marcus was voting for Adam, and we were like, man, Adam's really popular, he's going to win anyways, why would I give up my first choice to vote for Adam? I'm going to go vote for somebody else. So you try to game the system. But with single transferable vote, you don't need to do that, because if Adam wins this much, all of this is like, well, Adam, you didn't really need that much to win. Okay? So if I just let you win as is, these extra votes are wasted because you didn't need them to win. So I'm going to look at these votes, and I'm going to see how did people who voted for Adam, who did they want for their second pick? Okay? So he has 10% over the limit that he needed to win. Let's say half of the people who voted for Adam liked Diane as their second pick, and half of them liked Frank. Right? So Frank gets another 5%, and Diane gets another 5%. Frank now is over the limit. Frank gets a seat. Does that make sense, guys? Not? Okay, so Frank now gets a seat. Any of Frank's extra votes gets redistributed the same way. So like let's say it goes to Bob, okay? So these go to Bob, okay? Just for simplicity's sake. So now we still haven't filled the 3rd seat. We still haven't filled this 3rd seat. So what do? We look at Charlie and say, Charlie, sorry, you really didn't have a chance. So Charlie's eliminated. Where do Charlie's votes go? To whoever voted for Charlie as their first pick. Those ballots, they're not wasted. They go to whoever they picked as their second pick. So let's say all the people who voted for Charlie really liked Bob. In reality, it's a mix, right? But just say for simplicity's sake, now Bob gets extra votes. All right. Still, nobody has enough votes to win. So we look at the next
person who has the least, Diane, sorry Diane, you really had no shot at this. So we look at Diane's votes, even the ones that were given to her from somebody else. And we say, who is, because these people picked Diane for their first pick. So we look at these people's second pick, and we look at these people's third pick, because these were given from somebody else's second pick. And we then redistribute Diane. Let's say, you know, they all wanted to go here, and then some of them wanted to go here. So most of them wanted to go here, and some of them wanted to go here. Now we're basically saying, okay, we know Adam's in, we know Frank's in, so it's either between Bob or Emily, and, man, I picked bad names because all the men win. I'm so sorry about that. I should have just stuck to A, B, C, D. Okay. So now, because E doesn't have enough votes, they're eliminated, and then the three that are picked are Adam, or sorry, A, B, and F. Beverly. Yeah, go Beverly. And Amanda. Did I get that right to the experts in the back? 2 thumbs up, 3? Wow, okay. So that's how easy it is to explain to voters. Just rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So I would like to separate our conversations. It sounds, I get the general assumption around the table that we're going to elect all 3 at the same time. And so first, wanted to see if we could maybe make that decision first, because otherwise it's, you know, it's not like we can't continue to have the conversation about voting and things like that, but it would be helpful to do, because I think that makes a better case in my mind for using a ranked choice system than if we have 2 on one election and 1 on the other for each of these districts. So my general sense, I mean, I'm not sure it's my personal preference, but it is my general sense that that's the assumption around the table, that we're going to elect all 3 in each district at the same time. And then there's a discussion amongst whether or not people prefer ranked choice voting or just you vote for 3 and the top 3 win. So if I would like to make a motion that we go ahead and make that decision, that we vote for all 3 in each district at the same time. So there'll be 1 district at presidential and 1 district at gubernatorial, and all 3 seats for each district will be up simultaneously. Okay.
So the motion was made by Mary, seconded by Keith. Is there any discussion? Hold on,
And
I'll
also
get to you guys.
we'll get to public presentations, yeah.
I would have to disagree with that. And the reason I'm not for it is because if I'm in a district and let's say that I come really close to winning, or somebody comes really close to winning, I'm just throwing my name out there for the heck of it, I have to wait 4 years before I can run again. Okay? And, or I could move, but if you own a home and you want to have, you know, 2 mortgages or knock yourself out. But that means that somebody who may have done everything the right way, I mean, done a lot, prepared themselves, so on and so forth, if they don't win this time around, they have to wait 4 years. And I don't think that that's necessarily fair. Because I think you should have a chance to run this is my opinion, I think you should have a chance to run every 2 years. At least even if you have 2 in the gubernatorial and 1 in the presidential. Because you have a whole slew of people that might be ready, that very close to, you know, ran a great campaign, so on and so forth. They don't have to wait 4 years. The other thing is that if you have 3 people and say you fundamentally disagree with them or you don't like the way things are going, okay, you have to wait 4 years before you get somebody else to represent you. Versus when you have it every 2 years, you have an opportunity to say, okay, well, I don't know what these guys are thinking or these women are thinking or these people are thinking. You know, we need somebody who's going to right the ship. But if you have to wait 4 years, that's 4 years, and a lot can be done in 4 years. When you have 2 years, it's at least you have an opportunity to say, for those people that didn't necessarily agree with the platform of the first 3 people or the first 2 people, then somebody else can come in with a differing opinion, because the tide changes in this city overnight. You have to wait 4 years, and those are your people for 4 years. And so I just fundamentally wouldn't support that, but that's part of the discussion. Keith?
I tend to agree that 4 years is a long time for a district to go without voting for anyone. The flip side is, I think it's also confusing that sometimes I vote for 2 people and sometimes I vote for 1 person. Then there's a question, does District A vote for 2 people at the same time District B votes for 2 people? Or is it 2 people and 1 person? I mean, having an election that's asymmetric in the number of people that are up at different elections also, to me, can confuse voters and can lead to weird power dynamics.
Sorry.
I don't, I mean, in some sense, I'm recommending something just because it's what it is. If we elected 9 members to the council, then every 2 years we could vote for 2 people. 2 people in a ranked choice vote is 33% plus 1, I believe. And we believe there are districts where a protected CVRA class has 33% of the population present. I don't know if they're registered voters or not, but demographically, I think that still would let them pick a candidate of their choosing if they chose to vote that way. But that would be a recommendation to increase the size of the council to 9. I also think, I mean, Santa Clara grows by 10,000 plus people every election, or every census. And, you know, at some point we should have more representatives, not the same number of representatives representing the same number of people. We were 7 people when the city was 60,000 people. So I am not against recommending increasing the size of the council. I think 9 is as high as we can go, practically.
But the motion right now is...
I understand. I'm speaking to your comments on the motion.
Okay. And I would say confusion. I just have a hard time thinking that people would be confused. Because you have the voter education, you're going to get something in the mail 6 months prior to the vote saying you're in District A, and this election you have 2 representatives up or 2 seats up for election, and then 2 years you get one that says this election you have 1. So I don't think it's rocket. I mean, I don't think it's rocket science. People are going to get confused about that. I could see Hossam's, presentation, people getting a little confused about that. Not that they won't eventually get it. But again, the other piece is if we're looking for minorities, more minorities on the council, you have to wait 4 years before you have an opportunity to get a minority on council. If you want to go by what the spirit of this lawsuit is saying, it's really about more minority representation. You have a vote every 4 years. Your district has to wait every 4 years before, let's say hypothetically, you don't get minority representation. You have 4 more years to wait until you have an opportunity to have minority representation. So I'm weighing the pros and cons here. I'm not necessarily saying that I'm right, but I'm weighing the pros and cons as far as, again, there's no perfect system, and I just want to put out those, my 2 cents. We'll go to Teresa and Hossam.
So I don't know how I would vote on that particular issue yet, but one thing that would concern me would be the potential loss of expertise for a district. If all 3 seats came available, none of the incumbents got back in because of, term limits, and then a whole district might have no continuity of expertise about issues that are going on that really pertain to them. So that would be something I'd be concerned about. I would want people to think about that before they make a decision.
So one of the things that I think is I actually see the pros and cons that Tino and Teresa are saying. I think they're very valid. The only caution that I would have against going to 2 and 1 in that scheme is that when you do end up in that cycle, when you're only voting for one of them, you're really back again to somewhat, it's not exactly, but somewhat of an at-large where you're not getting a 2nd and 3rd place winner. You know what I'm saying? And we had that discussion, I think, the last meeting or the meeting before, where it was, we want to get the 2nd and 3rd place winners in there. And you eliminate that because now when you're going on the year where you're doing just 2 people, you're only getting the 2nd place winner. You're never getting the 3rd place winner. And when you're in the year when you're only picking 1 person, you're only getting the most popular person, not the 2nd and 3rd place, right? So I would caution, I still agree with the benefits that Teresa and Tino brought up. I think giving people an opportunity to vote every 2 years is wonderful. I love the idea of continuity. I didn't even consider that, Teresa. I think that was great. But when it comes to getting minority voices on council, it's always better to give more opportunity for the losers, the second and third place winner, right, to get on rather than just being a popularity contest. So that's why I would still prefer the suggestion in Mary's motion, because you'll still, Teresa, on the issue of continuity, you're still going to kind of address it because you're only voting for District A on this cycle, and then you're voting for District B on the next cycle. So at most, you're only turning over 3 people at a time. And remember, they're representing the whole city, not just their district.
Yeah,
right.
They're going to be primarily interested in the big development that's happening right down the road in there, is what I'm assuming.
I would hope that all of our council members are interested in all of the city issues. Yeah.
The goal of why we're here is to create a system that allows for maybe more minority representation. I think if we vote only every 4 years, it limits that opportunity. And if you went to 2 and 1 and then did ranked choice voting on top of that, then that, I think, creates the larger opportunity for a minority candidate to be successful rather than just the most popular person.
So I am actually not necessarily supportive of my own motion. I haven't really made up my mind either. It just seemed so like that. It seemed like this question needed to be answered first, logically, and so that's why I wanted to push it. I think I'm slightly in favor of my own motion at the moment, because I do think that the goal is to get political minority voices as well as racial minority voices that have more chance to get on council. And I think Hussam is exactly right. That's much more likely to happen when we have both the second and third choice candidates are able to get on at the same time. I think to the points about participation in the process, I might counter that if you're a really solid candidate and you come in 4th or 5th, then what you should be doing in the intervening time is volunteering your time on boards and commissions and, getting more time in front of council so that you are an even stronger candidate in 4 years. There's lots of ways in which, all of us participate in the process. There are many, many other boards and commissions that have real impact on what happens in the city. And so not to diminish the importance of being able to vote for who's on council, but I think there are lots of other ways for citizens to make a real impact in those times when they're not voting. And so I think the point of being able to get second and third political minorities, racial minority voices onto the council weighs it very slightly in favor, because I do think that you're both exactly right about the cons of electing 3 at a time. So I think but I just think there's like a little thumb on the scale for me of it would be better to get the second and third.
And those commissions are all 4-year terms anyways, so you're not going to go for a commission just to go to 2 years and then bail out just because you want a name recognition. That doesn't show sincerity or integrity in that. Okay. Jody.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to disagree with you also, Steve, because, and I was originally thinking a 2 and a 1 because you'd get every 2 years. But if the true purpose is to get more minorities elected, then if you only need 25% plus 1, you're much more likely to get somebody who's a minority to get elected, versus if you're only voting for 1 or 2, then you need a higher percentage. So the more you can drop that percentage, then the more people can get on, even if they have less money or less support from the city as a whole. So from the point of getting a minority elected, 3 seats, 3 all at the same time, as much as it makes me cringe about not being able to vote every 2 years, but it does seem like that would help solve the problem. And to what Teresa said about having this turnover, because I understand what you're saying, but we kind of have that now already because we have people term out all the time, and you could have somebody who decides not to run. So even now we can have turnover of 3 people, and and you still have continuity of staff, and you have continuity of the rest of the council and the mayor. So they would support the people who are new.
So I guess what I was thinking about...
Speak more into the mic.
The continuity was, just say the city was planning a new park or a library or some amenity, and there had been discussions and stuff, and now 3 people in one district are gone. I think it puts that district at an enormous disadvantage when big city planning decisions are being made. In the case where there would be 3 new, where there would be 3 new members, I would just think that might be something we should consider. Yeah, and you know, you're probably right. People that get elected put city first, but I think when you are going to districts, you are separating the city into 2 distinct groups who are going to be vying for resources and allocations and stuff. I just think we should think about that.
So I'd like to go to Marcus, and then I'd like to hear from the public, and then I'd like to call for the vote. Unless there's any other, I think we've had thorough discussion on this. So Marcus?
I just wanted to comment on Teresa's point. I think your point's very valid. I think you can also think in the term where that could also work in your favor as far as on projects, where if you have your 3 council members in favor of a project that you're not in favor of, you can all of a sudden have 3 new members with, you know, different opinions on it. So, like I said, your point is valid, but I think on the flip side, it could also work in your favor at hopefully certain points.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the, so Steve?
Can I make a quick comment?
Quick, please.
Yes. On the issue of, for people who are worried about not voting every 2 years, let's not forget that we still need to talk about when we elect the mayor and our chief of police and city clerk. So you may not be voting for a council member that year, but you still have other seats and other positions that you need to vote for. So you're still participating in the political process.
Right. And we're not going to discuss the police chief and the city clerk at this charter review. We may do it at a future charter review. Okay. So Steve, yep. So you'll be given 2 minutes.
I don't think I'm going to need 2 minutes. I just wanted to point out in response to the points that the chair and that Ms. Sulzer made, that if the plaintiffs get their way and you have 6 single-member districts, you're going to be voting every 4 years for 1 person anyway. Secondly, that person who might be most knowledgeable about the park in your district might be termed out. So I think it's a wash in terms of the argument. And so I hope you do support the motion to go to electing 3 people at the same time, because that lowers the threshold to 25%, makes it much more likely that a protected class can get elected during that time.
Thank you, Steve.
Hello, my name is Pedro Hernandez. I'm the Deputy Director of Fairview, California. I circulated a memo with my name on it. On the second page, you'll see a chart where we ran a demographic study, and we saw that if you created 2 districts and you tried to apportion and approximate what the citizen voting age population for the Asian American community would be, then this only works when you have all 3 seats up at one time. If you do 2 seats and do a fair election system, the threshold is 33%. Here we have the Asian American citizen voting age population ranging from 26% to 28.87%. So it's my recommendation that if you're going to put 3 seats, if you're going to make a 2-district, multi-member district, you ought to put all 3 seats up at once and utilize a fair election system so the highly integrated community, Asian American and Latino community, have a reasonable opportunity to have a candidate of choice elected in that district. The other part, so that's, so don't stagger the elections too. That's my recommendation. And using ranked choice voting in 2020 seems like, I think, the best advice I can give you, because that would be a high turnout election, and if 3 seats are up at that time, then there will be a greater opportunity for a more representative election at that time. How you get there between 2018 and 2020 versus a scheme that utilized a limited voting system, vote for one, so the county ROV has time to properly prepare to get a right bid to have an election system that could utilize ranked choice voting.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Pay, Fairville, California Director. So, as Pedro pointed out, I highly encourage you all to have all 3 seats up at the same time. And the strongest reason for that is because that threshold to win, right? When you change that math, when you change the system 2 to 1, it essentially keeps the problem the same, right? So, in order to have a fair representation system, STV, ranked choice voting, that means all 3 seats up at the same time, ensuring that that electorate determines who they want as their city council member. As an example, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, 95% of the voters got one of their top 3 choices elected. Can you imagine that? Your first, second, or third choice being elected into your city council. And in this method, you are able to make that happen. And Santa Clara would really put yourselves on the map, ensuring that you do have a fair representation system. The comparison of the Bay Area cities, Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, and San Leandro, we have a report done as far as representation goes, and it really does maximize every single vote. What we found is that more women, more people of color, more women of color are more likely to run because of the civility, because of avoiding issues like vote splitting. And what we found is that nearly 3 in 5 representatives in the 53 seats elected were, by ranked choice voting, were from the communities of color. So I strongly encourage you not only to have the 3 seats up at the same time, but using the ranked choice voting STV model ensures that promoting fairness, that not only this person is broadly representative, but you're ensuring that both the majority and the minority have their candidate of choice elected. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jeremy Macaluso. I haven't seen the sheet that was passed around that discussed the idea of coverage and how instant runoff voting struggles to get 50% coverage. But I think this is a really important concept for what you're discussing right now. Instant runoff voting is a single winner system, which means that it is always going to get roughly 50% coverage. And it's getting just under in a lot of cases because there's details. When you're electing 3 people at the same time, if you are using a proportional system such as single transferable voting, you will get 75% of people having their votes counted. And it's going to be just under because there's details, but it's going to be roughly 75%. At least more or less details. It will be somewhere around 75%. If you have 3 people, if you have 3 independent single winner elections at the same time, each one will individually get roughly 50%. But because they're independent, that means that the coverage is often going to be identical, which means 50% for each of them means a total of 50% as compared to a total of 75%. If you do 2 and 1, you're going to get 60%-ish and 50%-ish, and 60%-ish and 50%-ish means 60%-ish. So 3 at once means roughly 75, 2 and 1 means closer to 60. So support all of them at the same time. I also want to discuss that regarding the comment of being able to run once every 2 years. This current motion does not mention, but leaves open the possibility of running gubernatorial mayor elections and presidential council elections, allowing you to run every 2 years while while also running everyone at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So in light of what everybody has stated, I think I'm going to change my opinion. And the reason is because I think when I set out, I said that I didn't believe districting was going to necessarily represent the minority population. And I still don't think districting is going to represent. However, the compelling argument is that there's a greater probability that a minority may get on council by going to the ranked choice. And to do that, you have to do 3, because if you do 2 and 1, then every other year it's a popularity contest, and we want to avoid that. I also believe strongly that I'm not a big proponent of the color of one's skin. I never really have been. But I think at the end of the day, it's about as equal of a system as you can get. It's not perfect, but it doesn't discriminate against any one whether you're white or whether you're a minority, it really doesn't discriminate as much as kind of some of the other options in the way we've been doing things. And so in the spirit of wanting more diversity, I think the compelling argument has been made that that's how you are going to get closer to diversity, is if you have the ranked choice. And although I don't like not being able to vote every 2 years, the truth of the matter is, in order to implement anything like this and to be fair with 2 districts, it really has to be 3 at one time, because it doesn't, the numbers don't work if you do 2 and 1. We could go to 9, and we could, but I don't think that would go anywhere. I don't think the council would approve it. I don't know, people might say, well, we have 7 and we can't get anything done, and now we have 9. I'm not saying that we're not getting anything done, but I'm being facetious in when I say that. So if is there any other discussion on this motion? Again, the motion was Saskia.
I seem to remember that from my experience, personal experience in Australia, that there was a time when the council did exactly this, that they changed the system, and elections were held, certain districts had elections every 4 years, or I think they do it every 3 years there. I was trying to find out, but that there was a period of time that you don't get to vote. You got to vote in the larger election as a whole, but there was a time that you didn't. In the beginning, I can remember thinking, oh, this is very confusing, and people would call city council or the city hall and say, am I voting? Because they wouldn't remember, right? So there will be an increase in that, but I think eventually people will get used to it, and I think I can see, all I care is that there is representation, fair representation on council, and I think we can all agree that it appears that we don't have that, and there are some candidates that use their ethnicity from 5 generations ago to clarify who they are or who they aren't. And I think we have to kind of stop all of that and get on with reality, and our population is changing. There's people even like me, and I said it to her last time we had a charter review. Even though I speak English, doesn't mean that I necessarily feel like I belong here at times. So it's still a language barrier at times for me. I use different words. You all joke about it. I have a different accent, but at the same time, am I represented? I doesn't feel that way. Okay.
Thank you. There is one more member of the public that wanted to speak. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear him. Is there? Can we give him a?
Hi, my name is Gautam Badwe, and I haven't unfortunately been able to be here for the entire session, but if I understand things correctly, we are going to a system where we vote once in 4 years. If that's correct, I think that's a mistake in my opinion, because a lot can happen over 4 years, and there might be people who want a change after 2 years and want to try something different as a voting member. And I think that you take that away when you change the election to a 4-year period. So I just wanted to have my opinion heard. Thank you.
Yeah, Saskia?
And that is true in some ways, but there is also the fact that you can actually petition and get people taken off council. It has happened. We saw it in San Francisco years ago. There are ways around that. I don't necessarily believe that's, it's cumbersome. I know that it is cumbersome, but there are ways around it. Unfortunately, what we have now is also not fair. So it's, you have to weigh it up.
Thank you. If there's no more comment, I'd like to call for the vote. Or actually, I'll call for the vote. So all those in favor, hold on. I'll get it. If we could read the motion first, please.
Okay, the motion is to elect all 3 council members in a district at the same time. And the motion was made by Mary and seconded by Keith.
So it doesn't say anything about having the 2 districts be at the same time versus opposite. It's just saying all 3.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does the maker of the motion want to make an amendment to her motion to include that so we don't have to have an infinite amount of discussion?
I'm amenable to an amendment, but do people want to have like a whole nother discussion about that? Because if we do, then we can have a whole nother discussion about that. Keith, what do you think as the seconder of
I mean,
the
I think
motion?
at present, we elect roughly half the council every 2 years.
Mhm.
And I would prefer to elect roughly half the council every 2 years.
Rather than all
6 at once. Rather than all 6
Okay, so
at once.
I would like to, if Keith would like to also amend this, I'd like to amend my motion to have then districts elected in staggered. So like District A in gubernatorial, District B in presidential.
gubernatorial.
Okay.
And Keith has seconded my amendment.
And I am okay with that.
Okay.
Do we
So the-
technically need to allow people to comment on that amended piece?
Yeah, technically we do.
So like maybe we should do that.
Oh, actually,
Wait,
no.
wait, Brian.
No. Actually, I remember. We don't have to. We don't have to. However, in all fairness, if you have a quick comment, and you can make it rather quick, then I'll go ahead and take presentation from the public quick. Yeah, and it's new. Let's not rehash.
We're doing it together.
We're doing it now.
What I alluded to in the last couple seconds of what I was saying was that if you have the mayor run during gubernatorial years and the city council happen during presidential years, then everyone will be voting once every 2 years. Everyone can change what's
Right,
going
but they're not
on
voting
once
for the
every 2 years.
representative. They're voting for the mayor.
They're
They can
va-
only
they're
vote
voting
for
for
the mayor.
something.
Right.
They're voting for something once
Right.
every 2 years.
Well, there's also there's city clerk, there's police chief, there's ordinances, not ordinance, but measures. There's also state elections, there's county elections. So everybody will get a chance to vote, but we're not going to get a chance to vote for our representative.
Mostly, I would like this amendment to be a separate motion rather than an amendment, because I think people generally support having having everyone running together, but there are also some people who might vote against this because of the issue of having people not being able to vote every 2 years.
Okay. Teresa?
So this would go back to my earlier point. If we had all the city seats up at one time, we could potentially lose complete expertise on the city council, and that sounds like it would be a bad idea.
Yeah. Steve, quick, if it's new.
I just wanted to comment that staggered city councils, where roughly half are elected every 2 years and people are elected for 4-year terms, is well ingrained into California culture. As a matter of fact, general law cities are required to stagger the terms of their city council members. And so I think you should separate the question and vote on it separately, but I would definitely support that District A elects in gubernatorial years, District B elects in presidential years, and not both at the same time.
Can I take a straw poll of those who'd like to see this broken into 2? I got it. I know no one's going to raise their hand, but I have to ask. Okay. So the motion was that we have 3 members per district, and that we vote on those members every 4 years.
Right, and the districts would be staggered.
And the districts will be staggered between gubernatorial and presidential elections.
Correct.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next topic. What I want to do is talk about the method of voting, because that's the last thing this charter needs to do, besides transition. But I'm not even sure that transition is something that we need to give to the council. Although we have another meeting and we can do it. I'd like to actually have the discussion about the voting methodology, because we have had extensive discussion tonight on the voting methodology, which I think kind of has brought us full circle. So Hassam, real quick.
I'd like to make a motion. I think we've had a lot of discussion on it already, and then after I make the motion, obviously, we're going to open for discussion on the motion, if that's okay with everybody.
You can always make a motion whenever you want.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we go to ranked choice voting by means of single transferable vote because it is a multi-member district.
Second.
Discussion? That was a ranked choice.
Multi-member.
Ranked choice voting by means of single transferable vote. Yeah, that's what I explained. That's what I explained on the board.
You know, I just want to make sure with that, for the motion, we got it right. Discussion?
I'd like to support it but I would like to see whether or not Hassam might be amenable to a slight amendment, which is that we recommend that it's conditional upon when the registrar can support said it.
I would be happy to make that amendment.
Who seconded it? Jody? Okay. So the amendment is that that it's predicated on whether or not
not predicated. I think the motion would be that the city of Santa Clara moves to ranked choice voting by means of single transferable vote as soon as the registrar of voters is able to support such a system.
Perfect. Thank you.
Is that okay with you, Jody?
Well, and only to add that, and we keep it the existing method until then.
We keep it at large. It won't be existing because we're not by seat, but we are by district.
It's district at large.
By district at large.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, specifically, you're saying we don't draw districts in the city.
Oh, no, we draw the districts. We draw the districts. But when you're voting for those three, it's just top three.
Yeah, but that's why I didn't want to say as it is now because we're not doing as it is now, right? So I would just say, so if let me just restate my motion.
Let's leave that part out.
No, I think that part is important.
Well, I think you need to say...
Is that the transition, which...
No, not necessarily, because the ROV may not be ready by 2020 or whatever, so that's not...
Right. Yeah.
Can I just maybe amend my motion and then to see if that's okay with what people want to hear? So it's...
Go slow.
The city of Santa Clara shall move to ranked choice voting by means of single transferable vote as soon as the registrar of voters is able to accommodate such a system, and until then, we elect the members of the district at large.
And that's clear what that means at large?
Means that the top three vote getters win.
Okay, I'm good.
Within a district, yes.
And so I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm in District A, and the registrar of voters in 2020 is unable to do single transferable vote by ranked choice voting, and District A is electing 3 members in 2020. Do I get one vote?
No, you get three votes. That would be a regular at-large system in a multi-member district.
Okay, but can I vote for the same person 3 times?
That would be cumulative voting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me take public comment real quick because my ear's hot. I'm feeling like it's coming whether I acknowledge him or not.
And I'm just answering him based on
I totally get this, but I want to get to my car tonight and go home to my family.
Frankly, I think you should discuss how you vote until they have STV separately, because that is a discussion. If you do, it's called at-large, it's called plurality election. You shouldn't call it at-large, because at-large basically means the entire jurisdiction. You should call it plurality election. When you're electing 3 people, and everybody gets 3 votes, in order to be guaranteed that you get elected, you need to get at least 75% of the voters to put a mark next to you. It raises the threshold way high. You're going to end up with the largest faction of the city, of that district, electing all 3 seats. It is the worst system to get any minority representation.
But again, the minority we are striving towards that. But
Understood.
In the meantime,
But
we have an election that we have to address.
It's going to make you extremely vulnerable in the transition, whereas we already know the registrar can handle limited or cumulative voting until they can handle STV, and limited and cumulative voting both keep that threshold down to 25%.
As the maker of the motion, I would not be in agreement with changing the voting system twice. We would go to cumulative once, and then 2 years later we go to STV. It's going to confuse the heck out of people. So I would still keep the system as stable as it is, as stable as we have it right now, until we're ready to go to STV, and then we go to STV.
So you're leaving your motion?
I'm leaving my motion
Okay.
as stated.
Okay.
Yes. If they're in a hypothetical District A and B, and it's, essentially vote for 3, and there is a candidate that are minority supported, and they're able to get 35% of the vote, but they still don't win because that system dilutes their voting power, then that would be, federally, that would be a violation. So we're saying, the cool thing about limited voting is that it doesn't really change much. It says vote for 1. Right now, on your numbered seats, it says vote for 1 for each numbered post. So in the interim, having a system like limited voting would allow for voters in that district to be able to have an opportunity to have a candidate of choice elected. Once 2020 happens, then you can eliminate the possibility of vote splitting, and all sorts of people can run and not have to worry about vote splitting. So
Okay.
my fear is that if you do winner take all, essentially by district, that this lawsuit would still continue.
And just to add on to that, so the real challenge here is that, once again, plurality winner-take-all system. And you're essentially making the problem even more apparent in the interim. And what we're really talking about is 2 years. Just to put into perspective, San Francisco made the switch in 2 years. From 2002, when they got it, when it passed by the voters, in 2004, they made it happen. In Oakland, there was a 4-year time change, but the city council flipped the switch, and it was done in less than a year. So your equipment, although it's not there yet, if there's movement towards that, we can essentially make that happen in a year. And we have partnered with the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, which is run by former election administrators. So we have that access to vendors and technology and education. Voter education is key. That's part of our work as well. So this is why we would encourage limited voting, because you do have the one vote, which is essentially 2018. And then by 2020, that one vote is now going to become a ranking system.
May I,
Okay.
Okay. May I just respond to those comments, or no? Or other people?
If, hold on, I'm going to let, if it's something new. If we're going to rehash, then, because I don't have to do this. Okay, that's fine.
2018 is a transition year.
Mhm.
Everything that's happening related to the voting limitations of the registrar of voters is related to 2018 and 2020, potentially 2020, which is also going to be a transition year, because there's going to be 4 people up for election. And the final result is going to have 3 people up for election at a time. So 2020 is also a transition year, which means that unless the registrar of voters takes into later than 2022, everything that related to their limitations is transition. It should be discussed during the transition time and not now.
Okay, thank you. Hussam? And then Jody. Actually, Jody, Jody, go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll go to Hussam. But before you do that, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes. No, 30 minutes, because if we set a time limit, then we're going to get there. If we go on forever, we won't. Yeah. So I'll amend my motion. My motion is to extend the meeting until 9:30. Keith, second. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Okay, Jody, go ahead.
I'm just really surprised to hear the suggestion to go to limited voting, because that seems so counter that you're voting for 3 people and you only get 1 vote, and you don't get to vote for 2 other people that are going to end up representing you. It just seems very counter to me.
So, go to Mary. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I'm, just so you know, we're done with public comment, okay? And we're going to stick to the committee.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Mary.
So I see your point. I do think that, with the motion as I understand it now makes a lot of sense to me, and seems, 1, understandable, and 2, maybe then the city is, in a good position to push the registrar of voters to ensure that by 2020, if not sooner, I mean, if we say we want, single transferable vote as soon as possible, that's helpful to then getting their butts in gear. So I would support it as is. I totally get their points. It does create some real vulnerability in the transition time. that may then influence our next conversation about how we transition, because I do think that in some of the methods that are mentioned here, I think that the vulnerability is less in some of the transition methods than others, because I think that the plurality voting is not that different from limited voting when you're only voting for one person.
Right.
Which I think is one of the transition possibilities.
Thank you, Teresa.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, the vulnerability in the transition time is limited anyhow, because we don't, how many seats would be up?
Well, there's 2 in 2018. So
we would be limited because until everybody gets onto the same system. So it's not like we're going to have that huge vulnerability right then. And then I guess the next thing I have is really a question. Does the voting methodology change recommendation have to go in along with the recommendation to move to districts, or can we stagger it?
I think we previously asked this question to Brian, and he indicated that it's sort of up to council when they put things on the ballot, but they will probably put it all together.
Oh, okay.
But so they can put it on the ballot when they want to put it on the ballot.
They decide what to do with it. Okay.
I would not have, it makes no sense to go to 2 districts with 3 in each district unless you do one of the other methods of voting. So you would not stagger it. I mean, you'd only go to those 2 districts because of exactly what these folks were talking about. You'd have an even worse problem from a voting rights standpoint. So that you'd have to. It only makes sense to go to 2 districts if you do another method of voting, not a plurality method. But I also wanted to point out, in case that the folks who have commented didn't realize, we only have 2 seats up. So there's really not much choice about what we can do in 2018. So either you put both those folks in one district and do some kind of ranked choice voting for that particular district, and the other district doesn't get to vote, or you put them each in one district and you just let the winner win.
Yeah, Hassan.
So I totally understand where the folks in the audience are coming from. They're looking at the nirvana. And we have, as a committee and as a city council ultimately, and as the voters, have to deal with the reality of voter education, how the transition looks like, what people are used to, and I get it. But to have people go to limited voting or cumulative voting, which the system can support right now, as an interim solution until we go to single transferable vote or the ranked choice voting, I think you're confusing the heck out of the voters. And I know that it can put us in vulnerability only in 2020, because in 2018 we'll only have 2 open seats. So 2020 is the only scenario where there's a vulnerability, and that's only if the ROV can't get their system in place. So I think we're really arguing about a corner case where the impact really may not be that big, in exchange of doing something that voters can understand, that they can agree on, that they're used to with the school board race because they get to vote for multiple people in the same district. And so I'm still going to keep my motion as is. And I think it probably it may not be the most ideal scenario for how we, get to the single transferable vote by 2020, hopefully. But I think it's still gonna be the most logical approach and the most amenable to our council and our voters.
Mary.
So I'm going to keep my motion as is.
Thank you. Mary?
I just have a thought/question. It did seem like it was at least possible, maybe not super likely, but possible that the Register of Voters could do ranked choice voting for one person, the way that they currently do up in San Francisco and such, even in 2018, if they really, lit a fire under themselves and ask for permission. So I wonder, right. So I'm wondering whether or not, I'm in support of the motion as you have it, but I'm wondering about potentially amending it to just say that we want to go to ranked choice voting as soon as it's available. And if the Registrar of Voters could pull it off for the one or two district, I mean, for the 2 seats that we have up in 2018, then fantastic, which they may be able to do if they are in the 2 different districts, so they're each one.
So I think the motion, as I stated it, already covers that scenario, right? Which is
fantastic.
Which we say as soon as the ROV can pull it off. If they can pull it off even in 2018 by just getting permission from the state, then let's do it, right? So I think the motion as stated,
You meant to cover that
it covers it, yes.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? If not, I'd like to have the motion read again, and then we'll call for the vote.
She needs a microphone.
Oh, sorry. Been a narcissist. It's got my name on it. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is for the City of Santa Clara to elect council members using ranked choice voting by means of single transferable vote as soon as the Registrar of Voters is able to support such a system. And until then, if not, then elect city managers, elect council members with, I guess, with plurality, the top vote getter.
I think that correction came from the audience, and I will be happy to make that correction by saying plurality instead of at large.
So,
yeah.
But I think as you just clarified your motion earlier, for that to match with our written motion, it would just need to say ranked choice voting, because single transferable vote is only for that's definitely never going to happen, right? So for 2018, it would just need, because if it's a single seat, so if we ended up in the transition period voting for one in each district, that's instant runoff voting, right? So we need to, I think, just call it ranked choice voting.
I just don't want there to be any ambiguity in...
Understood.
Really, it is ranked choice voting. Because in 2018, it's single member seats. It's a single, it could be single member seats. So it doesn't make sense to say single transferable vote, because that only applies to multi-member.
Right, but that doesn't negate that you would still be by ranked choice voting.
Right, but you had said ranked choice voting by means of single, you had both phrases in the
only
motion.
reason I'm being very explicit about that, and I'm happy to drop it if it will. I just want to be very clear, because you can have multi-member district that doesn't use STV. The difference between an STV and a regular ranked choice voting is that, see that excess that candidate A got? That only gets redistributed when you say by means of STV.
So to clarify, if you added when multiple members are elected after the word single transferable vote, it would cover 2018, because we're not electing multiple members in a district, so it's just ranked choice voting.
We actually haven't determined that.
Well,
in the transition, the 2 people could be in the same district. So we truly haven't determined that.
Okay. But if we have determined that, it would be better to use single transferable vote in that case.
And that's why I want to be very explicit about saying STV, because as the Registrar of Voters came and told us last time, they are not ready to do STV until they go to the new system, which is, I think, why you brought that up. But I want to make sure that when we do go to the new system, that they do turn on STV and not leave it ambiguous because we were not clear.
Except that they did say ranked choice was possible, perhaps, maybe, in 2018.
If they get approval.
If they get approval from the state.
But not STV.
Correct.
Yes.
So by limiting it to STV, then there's no way you could do it in 18, even if we had single member districts.
Okay, we're talking about a hypothetical where the registrar, where the state will get us. We still have to put this on the ballot in June, and then by the time we get the results, the state needs to get the ROV of Santa Clara County certified to do STV, and we have to educate people all in the span of 2 or 3 months. Is not likely to happen in 2018, but for 2020 it is still likely to happen. That's why I still want to keep it as is, where I say as soon as possible, knowing that in 2018 it is very unlikely. You guys understand what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
So I mean, we're kind of debating about a hypothetical scenario in 2018 that really won't happen.
And again, this has to be put on a ballot.
Yes.
So we're adding one more layer of complexity to that potential ballot statement. So I want to hear from the city. I'd like to hear from the city attorney, and then if there's no more discussion, I'd like to call for the vote. and then move on to transition because we can go till 9:30.
I just wanted to remind the committee that this is just a recommendation. And, you know, obviously there's lots of ins and outs. So in this particular motion and whatever motion you're going to make about the transition, anything you're going to recommend needs to be to the city council by next week. If the city council is going to be able to take some kind of action that we can report to the court in the lawsuit, and that would be a goal that the city council could in some way give. What I would expect to happen is they would take your recommendations and they would decide whether they were going to go along with them or not, and then they would simply probably give direction to the city attorney to start drafting a charter amendment along the lines of the recommendation. If in that drafting exercise I came up against more questions, that's just what would happen. I mean, we'd eventually have to answer them and figure them out. The good news is here we have a lot of time because we're still a year out from the June election. We have until like March to finish this language drafting. But the main ideas we get. We understand what your sentiments are, even if your motion is not exactly the most nicely worded motion. I think we know what you want to do, and we get the sentiment, and we can present that to council.
Thank you.
Are you saying you're going to present to council next week? So our next meeting.
If we resolve the transition tonight, we can report to council.
Well, it sounds like he wants to report to council regardless because of the
I'm
lawsuit.
reporting to council everything you've done so far because I have to, because council doesn't have another meeting before the case management conference. Right. So I want to give council the opportunity to make a decision if they want to inform the court where we are in the process.
Okay. So I'd like to call for the vote. So all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Let's move on to transition. So we've got the 3 of the 4 things done. Keith?
So on the transition, I guess here's how I understand it, and someone correct me if I'm wrong. In 2018, we have 2 council member seats open. In 2020, we have 4 seats open. Because we elect 6 council members every 8 years, and if we elect 2 next year, we elect 4 the year after that. And if we continue in the current path, it would just be 2 and 4 and 2 and 4. And even now, if a council member resigns, they get appointed to the end of their term, right? So the 2 and 4 never flips?
No, they get appointed until the next election cycle.
Okay, but then that seat is shortened?
Correct, if it is within the first 2 years of the 4-year term.
Okay, so long term, it's 2 and 4, 2 and 4, 2 and 4, with corrections when people resign and stuff. And we're proposing to move to 3 and 3 and 3 and 3. And that to me means that in 2018, with 2 seats up, we can either put both seats in District A and elect them for 4-year terms, because that's what the 2 seats in 2018 would be, or we can put them in District A and District B in 2018, and one of them can serve for 2 years and one of them can serve for 4 years. Well, it's something we have to pick. If we move to districts, someone has to have a 2-year term. Okay. And so if 2018, one of the 2 seats had a 2-year term, or both of them are 2-year terms, then with the first one, in 2020, we have 4 seats up. And so District A would vote for 3 and District B would vote for 1. And then in 2022, we're correct. District B would vote for 3. 2024, District A would vote for 3. So that means it's 8 years to get to the expected state. And I think in 2018, if both of them serve 2-year terms, then we also get to a steady state in 2024. But we have 5 people up for election in 2020.
All of them, all 6 of them would be up. Yeah, that would not be good.
If they all did 2-year terms, they would all be up in 2020. So I don't think we should have the whole council up ever. So I don't think we can have both seats in 2018 serve 2-year terms, nor 4-year terms. Well, 4-year terms will work, because they start to stagger. So that's my understanding. Has anyone else done the math to have?
There are, well, yes, in fact, actually, I think Steve Chilton gave us a lovely memo on this at the back of his. There are some other possibilities. I mean, I think you're right that, like, at some point, at least one person is going to be elected to a 2-year term to make the transition happen. That point can happen at a variety of different times. I don't know which one is the best. But for, you know, the benefit of the conversation, I think it's possible that, so Steve's suggestion of A was in 2018, they're both in District B, and then elected to 4-year terms. And then in 2020, we elect one more person for District B to a 2-year term. And then District A elects their 3 folks for 4-year terms. I think that gets us then to the correct steady state by 2022, which is faster than any of the ones you were previously suggesting. That seems good. And I don't, yeah. Maybe that's also still true in his B as well. Although, but lots more people get elected at a time there.
Hussam?
So when you look at the last page of Steve Chessen's memo, you have basically A and B, and honestly, they both work. And I think from a percentage standpoint, in terms of what it takes to be elected, whether it's 25% threshold or 33% threshold or 50% threshold, you have to deal with one of those every time in both A and B. So realistically, it doesn't make a difference which one you pick. The only one that you want to pick is the one that is going to be less confusing to voters. So I don't see really a difference in terms of either one of them. In any of those scenarios, though, when it comes to who gets the short or the short end of the stick, it's whoever comes in second place or third place. That's the person that should get the short end of the stick. In other words, you're running for 4 years. But one of you is going to only have a 2-year term so that we can balance the system. Who gets the 2-year term? Well, whoever got the least number of votes. So I think there's still a winner, but whoever gets the least number of votes out of the winners gets the 2-year term and needs to run again. Yes, but they'll have to run again when their 2-year temporary term is up.
As long as they live in the right district.
Correct.
If they don't live in the right district, they could be elected for 2 years.
Sorry, say again.
My understanding is in 2018 we would draw the districts.
Yes.
And so you can't say the second place winner is going to get.
I got you, Mary.
Oh no. So if you look in scenario A, in 2018 District B elects 2 members for a 4-year term. So in that scenario, neither of those people are getting the 2-year term. And then in 2020. District B elects 1 member for a 2-year term. No. Remember, so out of the 2, oh Lord, this is confusing.
It's saying District B, now your third person gets a 2-year term.
Yes,
that gets them onto the same cycle as the people who were elected in 2018.
Yes, you are right.
The nice thing about choice A is it seems like there's a lot less people getting 2-year terms. There's only one person in 2020.
I like it.
And that's what I was originally thinking too. Versus
in option B, you are electing 5 council members at the same time, which I am not a big fan of.
It makes the most sense to me. I'd be happy to make a motion if people are okay with that.
So I'm still confused. I mean, I don't know if anybody else is confused.
Do you see Steve's suggestion for option A?
Yeah.
On the last page. Okay.
mean, at least I'm willing to admit I'm confused. If everybody else is solidly following this conversation, then just ignore me. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm going to knock my chair over.
Hello? So this is 2018, and this is 2020, right? In 2018, there are 2 seats up, right? You know?
Yep.
2018, there's 2 seats up, and 2020, there are 4 seats up. In this is District A and B, not option A and B. And can I see the paper again, Marcus? Thank you. So in 2018, District B elects for both candidates. So District A doesn't get to vote for council member in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And then remember, the total needs to be 3, right? That's the end goal. So in 2018, District B picks 2 people, so they have to pick 1 more person here, right?
And they get the 2-year term.
And this person gets a 2-year term.
To 2022.
Until 2022. And then here you elect all 3, and they go 4 years. And this is also 4 years. Mm-hmm. So only this person gets the short end of the stick, and it's just whoever that one person is.
But if you happen to live in District A, you don't get an opportunity to run until 2020.
Correct.
Based on where it's drawn.
Correct.
And if you are currently in District A and you have an opportunity to run again, then...
What do you mean by run again?
Well, I mean, there's 2 people that'll be up. Oh, I see where you captured it. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, I got it.
The nice thing about this is that, like I think Mary pointed out, only 1 person gets the short term out of all 6
Right.
candidates. And then the other thing that I just noticed is that this person is a popularity contest, right? Because it's only 1 person getting elected. Well, that popularity contest only lasts for 2 years. They don't get the full 4 years, so that's another benefit, I think. Whoever wins the popularity contest and not the kind of the... No, this 1 person is a popularity contest because... Even with ranked choice voting, that's still kind of a popularity contest because you're filling only 1 seat. The first loser and second loser, the second place and third place aren't winning, right?
Yeah, because you only have 1 seat. So popular guy wins, or popular woman wins.
No, but in 2018, you've got,
Also a popularity contest.
it's a popularity
plurality.
contest. Now, in 2020, we have ranked choice voting. So in District A, those 3 will get voted on by ranked choice.
Yep.
And whenever you have 1 person, whenever you have 1 person, it's popularity.
The second place and third place winners never get a shot.
Yeah.
Because they don't make it.
So make a motion, please.
I make that motion.
Well, you're going to have to articulate that motion.
I think it's articulated in option A on...
Well, then read it.
I'd like to make a motion that
They
says...
have to make a formal motion.
Yes. I'd like to make a motion that for the transition period, we do as follows. In 2018, District B elects 2 members for a 4-year term. And in 2020, District B elects 1 member for a 2-year term. In 2020, District A elects 3 members for 4-year terms. And then in 2022, District B elects 3 members, 2024, District A elects 3 members, and so on and so forth.
Okay, that's not going to work. So you can't go so on and so forth. So stick to, be a little bit more precise from 2000.
So I'm only going to talk about the transition period.
That's it. Yeah, don't worry about...
So the transition period. In 2018, District B elects 2 members for a 4-year term, and in 2020, District B elects 1 member for a 2-year term. In 2020, District A elects 3 members for 4-year terms.
Okay.
That's the transition period.
Okay. And is there a second? Marcus, seconds? Jody, question?
So I just want to double check. The 2 seats that are up, are those 2 people termed out? In actuality, which of the 2 seats that are up?
1 person is termed out in 2018.
And the other person could run?
The other person could run.
So what happens if they're not in District Area B? And that's their seat?
Then they can't run.
then they can't run.
It's not their seat anymore, right? Because we're ditching the numbered seat system and just going to districts. So if they just so happen to not be living in whatever ends up being District B, then that's just the way it is.
So if they're in A, then they would not be able to run. They get off, but then they could run
In 2 years.
into
In
the-
2020.
Okay.
2020, right. Mary?
Also, I feel like let's be realistic. Most likely, council would name the district such that that person could run, if they so chose. I would imagine.
Well, let's not go down that. I mean, I hear you, but let's
Right,
not
I just feel
let's
like
not
it's
go
not a
down where they
huge
may or may
worry.
not draw districts, because that's like a whole nother infinite amount of time. So I appreciate your comment, but I really don't want to go there.
No, but it's not how you're going to draw the districts, because you're either in one district or the other. So wherever they draw them, you're going to be in one district or the
That's
other.
right.
But the
You can
council could
swap
say,
District A and B, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
what-
You can just
whichever one is
arbitrarily
B.
pick which one is A and which one is B.
Whichever one is A, but again, that's not for us to determine here.
Yeah.
So, Keith, and then Steve.
This is perhaps a question for City Attorney or Rod. We passed term limits, which say you can run for 2 4-year terms. We are introducing a 2-year term. Does the person that picks up that 2-year term in 2020 have the ability to run for 2 additional 4-year terms? Okay, so it's not.
Yeah, we probably have to amend the term limit section to take into this account.
in the last charter amendment, didn't we say it was 2 years plus a day or something when we made that change?
I think we would just specifically amend the charter. That charter provision would have to be amended to take this into account.
But we could look at the language, because when we did those
Yeah.
last charter amendments, I thought it was over 2 years.
Yeah, it was, if you went over 2 years, it was considered as if you did 4. So if they just did 2 years, I don't know if that's, if that crosses the line or doesn't.
Okay.
We'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it. I think we can figure it out.
But do we need to come up with a recommendation that
No.
whether or not that person could
No.
run for 2 more terms?
No, I think
mean,
it's given.
we
that-
could come up with a recommendation for that.
You could, and I think it'd be better to start seeing if we could draft something that does this, and then if we still have questions about term limits, then we can come back and figure that out.
Section 701 of the charter says that a partial term in excess of 2 years counts as a full term. So I think it's already, so if this term is not in excess of 2 years, it is a 2-year term.
But it's also not a partial term. It is a
Ooh,
full.
interesting
it's a
points.
Full, it's a
I love
full
all-
two,
I love all
it's,
these
it's a full 2-year term.
All right, I think we should just not care about this right now, personally.
And again, the reason we talked about that was if somebody had a partial term.
Right.
So,
For the city attorney, I'm not really looking for a resolution here tonight, but I thought an interesting point was raised over here in that if one of the 2 seats, one person's termed out, the other person is not, if that person decides that they want to run for reelection, and we have drawn districts where they're not in the right district, is there any right to run for reelection once you've been elected to a position?
It happens all the time in congressional redistricting and in state assembly redistricting. So there's no right to run in a particular district.
Okay, I'm going to go to public.
I think my motion hasn't changed, right?
Nope. Okay, it's the same. I'll go to public comment. So, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, Steve, 2 minutes.
I'll be brief, and I appreciate your referring to my memo for this. It makes me...
We're not going to name it after you, though.
That's fine,
Don't ask.
There's an old saying that you can get almost anything accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit. So I'm happy to have somebody else's name on this proposal, whoever made the motion. But since my name was mentioned, I do want to thank you for that. I did want to point out, though, that the threshold of elections that I have in brackets in option A, those were assuming that you were going to be using other than a plurality system. Those thresholds are only if you were going to be using limited or cumulative. So since your motion is to use a plurality system to elect those two people, they would need, excuse me, at least 67% of the voters to support them each to be guaranteed of an election. Obviously, it's going to be the top two vote getters win. Of how many, they could win with a lot less than 67% of the vote, but that is the motion that you have approved previously. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, you're next. After.
Okay. Pedro Hernandez here again. I would advise that you put a date on when you want ranked choice voting, because if you say conditional language, we have conditional language with the county of Santa Clara about utilizing ranked choice voting, but if you put a 2020 date, then I think it puts the rubber meeting the road as far as proving action for all to see that you are making this path and you are serious about it. So I would suggest putting a date on when you want to utilize this proportional representation system, single transferable vote. The method of how you get there when you stagger those elections can change in a number of factors, and I think maybe City Council might be interested in weighing on those as well and looking at your recommendations. So you could even look at both, because getting to fair representation sooner is probably in the best interest of all. So allowing a reasonable opportunity for voters to be able to have an impact on their city council sooner than later, when that opportunity is greatest, is what really matters. So that's all my comment.
Thank you. Dave?
Dave Kavlicek. I want to point out that with the proposal as it is, voters in District B would not have a chance to vote with a proportional threshold type election until 2022. You know, and that a way of doing that, I know that, you know, Keith said it wouldn't be a good idea to elect the whole council at once, though it would be all but one member, since the mayor will be elected in 2018 and is and is on the council. But to elect one from each district to 2-year terms in 2018, and then elect each district 3 with STV for proportional representation in 2020, with one district to 2-year terms and one district to 4-year terms. You know, but it is important to get to represent the minority residents of the District B as drawn there sooner rather than later, and it won't happen until 4 years as this is written, though it will happen sooner for residents of District A.
Yep. Were you? Nope. Okay. Good. Okay. So that
I'd like to amend my motion.
Okay. Who seconded the motion? Okay.
The reason I'd like to amend my motion is just to add, I think because we're now talking about transition period, I think Pedro made the comment that if you just put in the language to say, we want the ROV to be, ranked choice voting ready by 2020, it would more encourage them. Do people feel that that's okay? I mean, it's not changing any of the substance, but it's in terms of transition, we say, and we encourage the ROV to go by ranked choice voting in 2020, and that would, I don't know, maybe our city clerk can comment as to whether that motivates them to actually move or not. Okay. Move faster or not. If it doesn't, then, I mean, if it's the same either way, then I don't think we need to add that language. But if it helps, then we can put that in there.
From my understanding in my conversations with the registrar's office, and Mr. Chesson has had as many conversations as I have by virtue of his standing on one of their subcommittees, the thing holding them back from moving is simply funding. It's not a personal desire for them for or against any particular election system, the same way it isn't for my office. In fact, as elections officials, we look at one of these election systems and say, hey, great, this will be an exciting thing to do as soon as the community determines whether or not they want to move to the system or not. And we implement systems without bias. It's what we do. The registrar's office seems to be the same way, in that they simply need the funding to be able to purchase the equipment to be able to move to their next type of voting system. With that, I don't know whether or not the registrar's office would necessarily be motivated or not. What you would likely need to do is include, not necessarily in your motion, but in a sense from your group, a recommendation that the City Council recommend to the Board of Supervisors and the Registrar's Office that the system is funded and implemented by 2020. And but I don't know that that's necessarily appropriate for this motion so much as it is to be included in the minutes as a recommendation from the body.
Then I'll be happy to keep my motion as is without amending it.
Thank you. Saskia? Oh.
No, I just wanted to make sure that Steve's understanding was the same and that we both have about the same interactions with the ROE.
Thank you. Saskia?
And the reason I would say don't put it, I'm all for having dates. It's great for a goal-setting purpose. But in terms of this, I also could see it as a way for everybody to get out of doing because they can't perform, because they can't do what they want to do. So I don't want to have it as an escape either. So I'm a bit concerned about that. Yeah, that's I think if we have it how it is, a bit loosey-goosey, I think it's a bit better than having a specific date and now saying we can't do it.
So, just out of curiosity, in 2018, we have 2 seats we're going to vote on. The 2 people that can run again are Patty and Kathy. So do we have to assume that they have to draw a line to include those 2?
They're not up in 2018. They're not up in 2018.
I mean, Dominic and Pat. So if hypothetically Dominic wants to run for a second term, which he can, do they have to draw the line to so then we're saying that that's just the way the ball bounces.
That was the whole point that I made was you're either in or out, but it's the council that decides whether A or B goes up.
Right.
So the council could decide we want to mess
How you
with
wanna-
Dominic and put him in the other district that doesn't have an election, or we can support Dominic and say we'll make it the district
Right.
that he's in
Got
is
it. Okay.
the one up. It's up to the council.
I just wanted to clarify to get it through my head.
I think our city attorney's comment about lines get redrawn all the time
Congressional
anyways,
and-
and there's no right for somebody to have to run.
Okay, is there any other comment?
Well, I mean, on that topic, we are moving the city to 2 districts. If the line is drawn somewhere near El Camino, someday someone will be elected who lives near the line, and the census will happen, and they will draw a new line, and that person might not be in the district that they represent anymore. And that is a consequence of districts.
Well, the truth is nobody really represents a district now anyways, so.
Well, currently they don't, but under this system, I mean, we can say people should have the whole city in mind, but people tend to listen to the people that can vote for them more than the people that can't vote for them.
Right. Okay, is there any other comment? So I'd like to have the motion read again, so we can
give her the mic.
It's not mine.
So, the motion for transition is for, in 2018, for 1 district, we'll call it District B, elects 2 members for a 4-year term. And in 2020, same district elects 1 member for a 2-year term, and District A elects 3 members for a 4-year term.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that does it. I don't think we need public presentation because we're pretty much done. It was unanimous. So I want to say thank you to everybody because I think we took on something that 2 other charters tried to take on and well, 2011 sort of, yeah, well, whatever.
Exactly what we did in 2011.
Whatever, but
Don't hurt anybody's feelings right now.
But this is this solution is so much better. Anyways, thank you everybody. This was a laborious process, but hopefully everybody felt that they were heard and had a chance to say what they wanted to say. No. So we don't need another meeting because we don't have anything else to discuss unless there's something else to discuss.
We have future agenda items on here, which, I think we should make a recommendation for, is the mayor, city clerk, and police chief also elected?
We're going to
by
get
ranked
that.
choice?
We're going to get that direction from council probably soon. There's going to be that and a number of other charter things to review going forward. But again, this charter, what we were tasked to do is not that. Right, but what I'm saying is this specific charter review was not tasked. Now, if you would like to make the recommendation that, I mean...
Well, if you don't want to have another meeting, I'd like, and here's the problem, I don't know if the motion's appropriate, right? I would like to recommend that we use the same system to elect the mayor, the police chief, and the city clerk that we do for city council members.
Make the motion.
Voting. So I'm going to make that motion. Now the question is, it's not on the agenda.
But it falls under the...
That's the question. That's why I wanted another meeting to talk about.
Can't? So we have to go back and reconvene.
No, it's from a Brown Act standpoint, you can't talk about it.
Okay, so it's a Brown Act violation.
So I would like,
let's go ahead.
I would like to ask to have that on the agenda for the next meeting.
We'll put it on the agenda. We'll come back for that specific topic.
And Tino, another thing. I know in our last charter review meeting, the committee reviewed the ballot language. Is that something that we will do, or will that be 100% within the purview of the city attorney and council?
I wouldn't expect to have the ballot language ready by the next...
No, not by next meeting. I'm saying, is that within the purview of this committee or not?
I don't know. I don't know what the ballot language is going to, when it's going to be ready. It doesn't need to be ready for quite a while. So I don't know.
But I mean, it's definitely not going to happen next meeting. But maybe we get direction from council as to whether or not we would reconvene.
Yeah, I think the whole idea would be we'll report back to council next week, and they'll tell us when they would want to reconvene. You guys, I think they probably would like to have a break before they come up. They're not going to come up with any new charges to you next Tuesday. There's just too much on the agenda next Tuesday. So I would expect you won't have anything new to consider, if at all, until, sometime in August.
We're not meeting.
We are.
Well, I might not be here. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about next. Why would you meet again? What would you talk about?
Keith's agenda item.
I agree that before we meet again, we should get direction from council as to what, if anything, they want us to talk about. And then I think there's got to be some kind of, maybe a straw poll with the committee members as to whether they want to continue to do that. Quite frankly, personally, I signed up to talk about the election methods. If we're going to turn this into an open up the charter and review a bunch of different sections, I'm not sure I'm in for that, and I think we should make sure that there are other people to see if they're in the same boat or not.
I think the method we use to elect, the mayor and the city clerk and the police chief certainly falls under election methods. I mean, to me, we've talked about how it's confusing to people. To me, it's particularly confusing if we say we're electing your city council proportionally, but your mayor is still first past the post. And you don't rank the choice for the mayor. You rank your city council members, you don't rank the mayor. I mean, I think it's a lot easier for people to understand if it's the same for everything. But that's not on the agenda, so we can't talk about that tonight.
No, we actually can't, and so I don't want to have a discussion on that tonight.
Which is why I just asked to say.
I think what Steve is saying is exactly what I was getting to, is that anything outside of this. So I do believe. I mean, I do believe that does fall under the purview, because we're talking about council members, but we also have 3 other elected positions, and so I think that does fall under the purview of this committee. But anything outside of this is what I'm trying to say. If they want us to come back and say, should we look at voting for a police chief, or should it be appointed by council or whatever?
That, yeah.
Right. This committee, what I'm saying is, I'm not sure yet, but my understanding is that there are going to be additional things that the council is going to want, perhaps potentially this committee to look at in the future. So I don't know what those action items are. I don't know when. I don't know if they're going to say we're going to have a whole new committee, or we're going to, offer it to the current committee because we work together. I don't know. But I'm saying that there is a very good chance that there will be additional charter items to review, and it may or may not be by this committee, and I don't know when. So I'm just giving you that heads up. But as far as this goes, it makes perfect sense to discuss the mayor, the police chief, and the city clerk, because it does fall under our entire discussion. Jody.
And I want to add that the city attorney was pushing us to make some decisions before the next council meeting because of the lawsuit. But I agree with Keith that we should talk about these other positions, because it seems like in other cities they've moved all of their elections, not just like the council or the mayor. They moved all of them. And but we don't need to decide that before next Tuesday's meeting. It's reasonable to wait until our next meeting in July in a couple of weeks to talk about it and go back to the council with additional recommendations for these issues, because it doesn't directly affect the lawsuit.
I think the other thing, just real quick,
Are you suggesting that the election of the police chief and the city clerk affect the lawsuit?
No, exactly. I'm saying it doesn't affect the lawsuit.
And the election of the police chief is just so outside the realm of voting CVRA. I mean,
we all agree with that. So what we're saying is it doesn't affect the lawsuit, but if we're switching how we're voting in the city, we want to talk about whether we want to be consistent with all of our city elected officials.
But suppose they say maybe we should consider a charter amendment that doesn't elect the police chief or the city clerk. Then why would you bother talking about how you would elect them? I mean, you're kind of...
Nobody has suggested that.
Well, it's things people are talking about. And, I mean, they did not give this charter commission charge to look at anything other than district elections.
Now that I think about this, and maybe I'm wrong, but only one person can be mayor, only one person can be police chief, only one person can be city clerk, so you can't really have ranked choice or cumulative or anything else. It's going to be plural.
No, you can. No. You can have ranked choice.
Oh, so we would have.
If you don't get more than 50%, what do you do? If like 5 people run for mayor and nobody gets 50%, how do you decide who wins? Whoever gets the most votes, or do you start to eliminate the least vote getter and redistribute their votes?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but Brian, I think what Jody was saying, and correct me if I'm misrepresenting what you're saying, is that we don't have to rush for the sake of the lawsuit on these other issues because they have no bearing on the lawsuit. I think that's what she was saying.
But I also thought our charge was to look at method of elections and not, and it wasn't just limited to council.
It was very, very narrow.
I can't find that in my book.
Yeah, it was not to look at anything else other than council district elections. That was it.
But isn't there council district elections?
No.
No, it's not.
It's not.
But I mean, I watched the city council meeting about 6 weeks ago. I don't recall it being as narrow as you believe it is.
It was only about council elections. That's all it was about.
And
well, so here's the deal. I understand what the city attorney is saying, I understand what Keith is saying, but we have a right to make a recommendation, and they can take that recommendation and chuck it and say, that's not, that wasn't part of what we asked you to do, so we're going to take that piece and throw it out. And, Brian, I mean, to be honest with you, I have a group of people here that want to weigh in on that, and they want to give their recommendation to the council, and I think they should be able to do that. I understand why, I perfectly understand why, and I probably won't be your favorite person going forward, but the truth of the matter is these people want to weigh in on that. They feel that it's important. They feel that, as Hossam said, that perhaps the mayor, if somebody doesn't reach a threshold, there is, I mean, if you want diversity, and to say we only want it for council is, I would argue, just as narrow-minded.
You're never going to get diversity with an elected police chief.
How do you know?
Because the system is so the number of people that can run for police chief is so narrow that having an elected police chief almost guarantees you're not going to have diversity. Well,
No.
first of all, you have to be, okay, you have to be a
First, I
police
mentioned
officer.
three
You have to live in Santa Clara.
Right?
You have to somehow have some rank in Santa Clara.
So what if Winters wants to run, Malai wants to run, and four other guys want to
Well,
run?
if they want to run, that's fine, but it's almost as if the police chief appoints the next police chief,
No,
because
but
it's
you can
almost
have-
always the next highest ranking police chief.
But you can have an ethnic person running, somebody who is of color, running for police chief who meets all those criteria.
Right.
Right. So I don't see why that would not be within our purview in terms of looking at how we elect.
Well, you're assuming, but by making a recommendation, you're assuming that you're going to have an elected police chief. It should be a broader discussion that should these elections.
We're making recommendations based on what the current system is right now, which
And you
we
weren't
do
asked to
elect
do
our-
that.
We do elect our chief of police, so I don't see a problem with us.
You know,
deciding
Brian,
how we elect
I'm gonna be honest, when I talked to a couple of council members, and I'm not gonna disclose who, they were much more broad in their expectation of what we're doing. They weren't like, we only want you to do this and that's it, to be quite frank. They weren't just saying, you only do this and we want nothing else. In fact, there was discussion about other things we might talk about regarding the Charter Review Committee that's coming down the pipe. So to be honest with you, you can say that this is narrow, but all we're doing is making a recommendation. If you can't be here, then send somebody else who can. I get that. But if these people want to make a recommendation to council, they have a right to make a recommendation to council, and council can do whatever they want with that recommendation. They can chuck it and say, you know what, we're going to talk about that later. Or they can say, thank you for doing that. We actually didn't think about that. That's actually something that we should include. So we're going to reconvene next week. We're going to put this on the agenda item. We're going to talk about it, July 24th. And if you can't be here, Brian, I understand that. Get somebody who can. But at the end of the day, I think these people want to make that recommendation. I think we've done enough work to where they want to make a complete recommendation, that we've thought everything through, and I think they have a right to do that. I'm sorry, that's just my 2 cents.
So are we having that on the agenda? Yes. Can I make a motion to close the meeting?
Yes, motion to adjourn. All in favor? Thank you.